All right. Hey everyone, Dogen here. So hopefully this is working. I'm going to wait a couple seconds to make sure that everything is going okay. Can you all hear me and see me okay? I misclicked this video, but I think I'm staying here now. Yeah, okay, cool. Then in that case, I'm going to tweet out that I'm live. Give me 1 second, please. Okay, yes, yes, and yes. Okay, a lot of comments coming in. Thank you very much. Please give me 1 second while I tweet out the fact that I'm live. Live on YouTube, reacting to pitch accent is a scam. Okay, we are good to go. All right, very curious what the argument will be. About to watch Dogen get destroyed live in 4K. Wait until they figure out stress accent is a scam. Well, the thing is, okay, so I teach pitch accent. This is the very first thing that I say at that I need to say at the beginning of this video. Everything that I'm about to say, you have to think about critically. You have to remember that everything that I'm saying, think of it, view it through a lens of Dogen is trying to sell me a product. You can't just think, okay, well, I like Dogen's jokes. What he's telling must be the truth. You got to come to a conclusion based on what you think about, the various debates, each side of the debate at hand, right? At the beginning of my pitch accent series, I say this is what I think about pitch accent, but realize that I'm selling a product, part of which is a pitch accent course. So take it with a grain of salt. Take everything I'm about to say with a grain of salt. Now there's a video that's kind of making the rounds, so to speak. It's called Japanese Pitch Accent is Useless. And let's go to that now. It's this video up here. There's been a fair number of videos over the years that have kind of talked about this a little bit. Well, I guess I shouldn't show my live streaming thing. I'm gonna have to move that to a different window. Give me 1 second, please. I'm gonna have to go back to this. And okay, here's how we're going to do this. We're going to move that over here. Okay, hopefully everything's still okay. So there have been a lot of videos over the years where it's like, ignoring pitch accent is a mistake. The pitch accent controversy in Japanese learning. Pitch accent is stupid. Change my mind. Understanding Swedish pitch accent. Okay, that's different, but you get the general idea. Is it actually worth it to learn pitch accent? Yes or no? And over the years, I've kind of avoided the drama when it comes to this particular topic, because I think most of it is more or less just that. I think a lot of it is kind of drama, and I'd rather kind of just focus on teaching as opposed to get involved with the stuff that it actually doesn't really come across as, in my opinion, terribly helpful. But a lot of the points that are brought up in this video, I actually think are really good. And I think there's a lot of truth in some of them. And I think there are some points in this video that I don't really agree with very much. But what I want to kind of do is just present some more information as someone who teaches pitch accent to hopefully inform as many people as much as possible about this particular topic, such that people can make an informed decision about their Japanese studies going forward. So, okay, how does all that sound to all of you? Rip. If you are studying Japanese and are not constantly stressed, are you even studying Japanese? Thinking hat on, folks. Did you get a new camera? Yeah, I actually did get a new camera. Oh, gosh, darn it. Okay. I like it. I'm interested now. Okay, cool. So please forgive me 1 second. I need to kind of organize my windows just a little bit more. I thought I had all this set up, but I'm going to move, let's see, pop out chat. There we go. Okay, here we go. that should be working now, and I'm going to move that to a different window. Okay. Can everyone confirm that they can still hear me and see me? Everything's still okay? If that's the case, we can get right into it. Yep, okay. So let's just start watching this video.
Many of the talking points for pitch accent that I'll be arguing.
Okay, let's start at the beginning. And
Hello everyone. If you're a
please also let me know about the audio of this. Does this sound okay?
Japanese language learner, you've probably noticed the obsession with pitch accent these last few years or so. I must admit, even I got a bit swept up in it a few years ago, and for a short time even ended up believing in its importance. But after reaching an advanced level, I've come to realize it's not actually nearly as important as the pitch pushers claim, and the whole obsession with pitch just honestly seems bizarre to me now. If you want...
Okay, video 30% too loud. I'm going to bring that down just a little bit. How does this sound?
To study pitch accent, I won't tell you to quit, but I simply want to debunk the widely believed pernicious myth that you need to study pitch accent to sound good, and I really don't think it's necessary at all. Many of the talking points for pitch accent that I'll be arguing against in this video are almost entirely from the YouTuber Matt vs Japan.
Okay,
I don't have anything.
Let's restart the video then.
Hello everyone. If you're a Japanese language learner, you've probably noticed the obsession with pitch accent these last few years or so. I must admit, even I got a bit swept up in it a few years ago, and for a short time even ended up believing in its importance. But after reaching an advanced level, I've come to realize it's not actually nearly as important as the pitch pushers claim, and the whole obsession with pitch just honestly seems bizarre to me now. If you want to study pitch accent, I won't tell you to quit, but I simply want to debunk the widely believed pernicious myth that you need to study pitch accent to sound good, and I really don't think it's necessary at all. Many of the talking points for pitch accent that I'll be arguing against in this video are almost entirely from the YouTuber Matt vs Japan. I don't have anything against him personally, it's just that he is probably the most prominent pitch polemicist on the internet, and he seems to have originated many of the most common pro-pitch arguments. So let's get into it. Here are the top reasons why you should ditch pitch as soon as you can.
Okay, so first of all, before we actually get into the video, one of the things that I'd like to do is kind of address this idea that there's an obsession with pitch accent. It's funny, before I started doing this live stream, I tried to record this video, but I couldn't do it because it didn't come on, it wasn't like genuine. I was kind of like overthinking and stuff like that. And the only way that I can make this video properly is to give an uncut reaction so that you guys can give make up your minds for yourself. And again, the first point that I want to address is, am I obsessed with pitch accent? Is someone like Matt vs Japan obsessed with pitch accent? Well, let me tell you guys why I started talking about pitch accent, and yeah, you can kind of make up your mind based off of that. When I had about 4,000, maybe 5,000 subscribers, one of my videos was picked up on the Learn Japanese Reddit. And the title of the thread, I think it was like, this guy is pretty funny despite the fact, or this guy doesn't get very many views despite the fact that he's actually pretty funny. Kind of a backhanded compliment. But what happened was, beneath that video, there was a fair number of people that said, how did you study Japanese? And then they also said, do you have a Patreon? Because I like what you're doing. And if you do have a Patreon, I'd like to support what you're doing. I didn't know what a Patreon was at the time. I looked into it and I kind of put two and two together. And what I mean by that is, up until that point, I had never met another Japanese learner who had studied pitch accent. And because of that, there were certain aspects of my spoken Japanese that sounded better than other learners' Japanese. Are there a lot of Japanese learners out there that have better Japanese than me? Certainly. There's even some Japanese learners out there that have never studied pitch accent that have better pitch accent than me. Okay? But I think that these people are certainly the exception to the rule rather than the rule. And for me personally, when I studied pitch accent and also things like devoicing and kind of aspiration in Japanese, etc., it made a tremendous difference that even I could notice in my own spoken Japanese. It was kind of like a light bulb went on. And when people said you should make a Patreon, I thought, okay, well, I don't want to just put out like a tin can on the internet and be like, here I am, I'm making videos, give me money. I want to actually provide something that's a little bit more useful, something that actually has a little bit more service. And because I was basically poor at the time, I didn't have any money, I thought, if I'm going to make something that hopefully generates some revenue for me, some income for me, then I would rather not compete with a lot of the big resources, Japanese learning resources out there, like Japanese Pod 101, Genki, etc., etc. And so I thought, well, learning pitch accent helped me tremendously, and I think that it could help a lot of other people too in similar situations. So that's the thing that I'm going to focus on. I definitely don't consider myself obsessed with pitch accent, but I can see why people think that I am, because it's the thing that I chose to teach. But I chose to teach it, again, not because I'm obsessed with it, because it's the thing that helped me and the thing that nobody else was teaching at the time. So I saw an opportunity there and I thought, that's what I want to teach. I think it could be useful. I think it could help some people. So that's kind of addressing the obsession comment. But let's get into kind of the meat of this video.
Dogen will mostly take care of it. Yes, I've seen the videos that nitpick all the so-called pitch accent mistakes that highly advanced learners make while speaking. It might be easy to see that and conclude that you can't acquire pitch accent and it's necessary to study it, but there's a few things you should consider first. Firstly, because emphasis is put on the mistakes, it's easy to overlook the fact that most of it is actually correct and just how minor and subtle many of those so-called mistakes are. Secondly, many of those so-called mistakes don't necessarily sound non-native. Many times it
Okay, so the first point that's on this video right now, this is going to be a long stream. It's going to be really long, just so you guys know, because I can't really properly articulate my thoughts on this argument without talking at length. But let's talk about point number one. Most advanced speakers get the pitch right most of the time, and many mistakes are very minor. So many people who have never even studied pitch accent end up ironing out many of the more common pitch accent mistakes that they were making early on, and the mistakes that they do still make in their later years, they're not that big of a deal. That's point one of this particular page of the video. And I actually agree with this. I think that most people who live in Japan for long enough end up fixing most of their more egregious pitch accent mistakes if they kind of approach studying in a specific way. That said, one of the things that I want to point out is that in this video,
pronunciation of that word.
The speakers that the immersion guy has, that I guess Matt versus Japan talked about in his video, a lot of these people, their Japanese sounds good, not despite the fact that they never studied pitch accent, but because, like Kazumoto, for example, the black dude in that video, he's got phenomenal Japanese, and he went really hardcore into the all Japanese all the time approach. And there's kind of like different levels when it comes to, what would you say, how hardcore you want to be about your Japanese studies. This is kind of like the fundamental kind of argument. Dogen being more dad gen than ever. Yeah, I'm getting older, but there are some people that the most important thing for them is to sound as native as possible, and they'll do anything to achieve that goal, right? Even if that means only doing input for a couple of up to years, never speaking Japanese, only listening to Japanese. There are other people, kind of like a rung down on that hardcore ladder, like myself, who really want to sound as native as they can, but it's not the absolute most important thing to them. And they would also like to try and speak some Japanese as they learn it. Like they're not ready to just like basically bunker down for like a year or two and not do any output. And I think for people like that, which is, I would argue, the majority of learners, it definitely is useful to study pitch accent because, again, in the video, we can see most advanced speakers get the pitch right most of the time, and many mistakes are very minor. This is again true, but there are many beginner learners and intermediate learners that are making a fair amount of pitch accent mistakes in their speech that would like to get rid of those mistakes sooner than later. They would like to, if there's a tool set out there that they can use to improve their pitch accent here and now, they would like to utilize that. And they don't want to wait 4 or 5 years until, basically every aspect of their Japanese is really good. And one of the things that can be a little bit difficult to understand is that if you've never studied pitch accent, and this is I'm gonna get some flack for this, but I'm gonna say it because I think it's true. If you've never studied pitch accent and you come from a stress accent background, like English or Spanish or German, then it can be a little bit difficult to understand what it feels like to a Japanese native when you make a pitch accent mistake, because you can't hear the mistake that you're making. And in the past, I've said that, well, if you make a pitch accent mistake in Japanese, it's kind of like saying the word tomorrow as tomorrow instead of the correct tomorrow. But this argument is a little bit hard to wrap your head around because, well, it's easy to wrap your head around, but because it's such a hypothetical, it's not really, what would you say, that practical of an argument. This, I think, is the better argument. This is the argument that I think a lot of people will get a lot of actual value out of. I believe this, and I'm going to get flack for this, but I think that's okay. Again, you guys need to make up your mind about what I'm about to tell you. If you're learning Japanese and you come from a stress accent background, like English, then there's a fairly high probability that you're saying many basic words in Japanese with the incorrect pitch accent. This is true for myself. And for example, if you say the word Japanese as Nihongo instead of Nihongo, that's kind of like saying the word English as English. What I mean by that is there's a fair number of Japanese people who regularly mistake their R's and their L's. And they do this because R and L aren't sounds that are in Japanese, right? So they're unable to pick up on the fact that they're mixing up the two because they can't hear the difference between the two. And because of that, they end up doing so on a fairly regular basis. It's very true for pitch accent. It's kind of similar when it comes to pitch accent. Because pitch accent isn't something that exists in English, if you've never studied it, it can be quite hard to tell if you're making those mistakes. And naturally, because of that, you might be making a fair number of mistakes on a fairly regular basis. I'm not trying to fearmonger. I'm not trying to say, therefore, you should study pitch accent and use my course or Matt versus Japan's course. What I'm trying to do is give people who have never studied pitch accent kind of like a frame of reference that they can use to understand, again, what it might sound like from a native Japanese person's perspective if you make a pitch accent mistake. If you say the word Japanese as Nihongo instead of Nihongo, or if you say the word English as Eigo rather than Eigo, that's again kind of like a Japanese person mixing up L and R when they speak English. It's kind of like that. Again, not trying to fearmonger. It's just, I think, a good way for people who have never studied pitch accent to wrap their mind around it. It's kind of that kind of mistake. That being said, you don't need to study pitch accent. You do not need to study pitch accent in order to sound extremely natural, okay? I'm going to come back to this point later in the video. You don't need to study pitch accent in order to sound very natural. But let's keep watching.
Is put on the mistakes. It's easy to overlook the fact that most of it is actually correct, and just how minor and subtle many of those so-called mistakes are. Secondly, many of those so-called mistakes don't necessarily sound non-native. Many times it just sounds like a different pronunciation of that word or phrase that would be preferred in a different mistakes are. Secondly, many of those so-called mistakes don't necessarily sound non-native. Many times it just sounds like a different pronunciation of that word or phrase that would be preferred in a different region somewhere outside of Tokyo. Sure, there are some people who claim that it's bad to have a mixed pronunciation and accent and should focus on the pronunciation from a specific region for the sake of consistency. Anyone who claims this is a naughty boy who deserves a good spanking, because this is nothing but baseless fanaticism. The only people in any language who have a pure specific regional accent are those who spent their lives in a specific region. Anyone who
Right, but I feel like that's most people.
Moved around when they were...
There's a fair number of people that do end up moving, as they grow up. There are so many points that I want to talk about when it comes to this particular topic. I have made the claim in the past that I think that you should strive to speak standard Japanese. There are many reasons for this, but like the guy says in the video, one of the reasons that I've said this is because if you don't study pitch accent, it might sound like you're speaking standard Japanese sometimes and like Osaka ben other times and like Aomori ben other times or Oita ben like other times. It's kind of like, this is a bit of a stretch, but you get the general idea. If I'm speaking like this, and then I suddenly say the word pen, like pin, like out of nowhere, like someone who was born and raised in Texas. If I say most words with standard Seattle, West Coast English, but then suddenly like every now and then I say a word that it sounds like I'm saying it with like a different dialect, that sounds a little bit discombobulated. I think that that's true. The creator of this video says that this is kind of a null point. I'm not trying to twist his words by any means. It seems to me that he's saying, but even native speakers often end up moving and their pitch might sound, for some words, might sound like this region sometimes, and it might sound like this other times. But there's kind of like is there like an ad going on something right now? Sorry about that, guys. I spent my first 15 years in 3 different countries. I suddenly want to hear Dogen spontaneously talk about orange juice. Yeah, but what I'd like to say is that, first of all, and I think that this is the most important point, if you never study pitch accent, then it might be years before you start speaking Japanese with pitch accent as opposed to stress accent. So even if there are native speakers who, generally speaking, they use this dialect sometimes, but they use every now and then they switch into a different word. Yeah, native speakers do that sometimes. Right. But native Japanese speakers, they're still speaking with pitch accent. And again, if you're coming from a stress accent language, the kind of mistake that you're going to be making when you get the pitch accent of a word wrong is fundamentally different, because stress accent and pitch accent are fundamentally different. So if someone from, I don't know, Osaka or something like that ends up, getting the pitch accent of a word wrong, that's very, very different from someone who is brought up using a stress language, because they're not only going to be getting the stress wrong at a much higher frequency, but they're also going to be saying that syllable of the word longer and significantly louder than what it should be, because those are the characteristics of a stress accent language rather than a pitch accent language. So even if native Japanese speakers do kind of sometimes fluctuate between different dialects, sometimes maybe they might use some words that speak like this, sometimes they might use words that sound like from this region, those aren't going to be the same kind of mistakes that I think that most beginner and intermediate learners are going to be making when they're studying Japanese, because again, they're coming from fundamentally different backgrounds. But on top of that, I kind of disagree with the claim to begin with, which is that native Japanese speakers are kind of like switching willy-nilly between different dialects on the fly. And this is only true for people that are brought up with like brought up in one specific region. Because in my experience, this is anecdotal, take it with a grain of salt, most Japanese people are brought up in one region. Most Japanese people that I've met, this is most, not all, but they're brought up, they're raised in Tokyo, and they stay in Tokyo after they graduate from high school. Or they're born and raised in the inaka, so like, I don't know, Oita, like where I'm from, and then they end up moving to Tokyo after they've already spent basically their formative years, their adolescence and puberty, all the way up to the end of puberty and graduating from high school. Most people don't end up moving a tremendous amount of times. And the number of people that do end up moving, among those people, the number of people that end up moving into a place that uses a fundamentally different accent is even lower. So yes, there are definitely some Japanese speakers that kind of fluctuate between one dialect and another. But I would say that most Japanese speakers kind of have a base. And one really interesting phenomenon, I'm gonna save this actually for later in the video, but yeah, let's just keep going. Let's keep going. Yeah, many natives don't even have a consistent accent. I guess I would take issue with this. I mean, it's kind of like says who. Maybe that could be this learner's experience, but my wife always speaks with Oita Ben because she's from Oita. Most of my friends that were born and raised in Kansai always speak in Kansai Ben, and most of the friends that I met who live and were born and raised in Tokyo speak with standard Japanese. Yes, many natives don't even have a consistent accent, but I don't think that's true for most natives. And again, I think that the kind of mistakes that natives who have moved around a lot, those are going to be, again, I think fundamentally different from the kind of mistakes that someone who's coming from a stress accent language makes to begin with. So yeah, anyway, let's keep going.
Growing up or had significant exposure to other regional accents will end up with a mixed accent in their native language to varying degrees. And even then, there will be accent variation based on so many factors: age, sex, personality. Hell, even knowing a foreign language can have subtle impacts on the pronunciation of your first language. To suggest that you must aim to have a consistent accent from a region, even though many native speakers don't, is foolish at best.
Okay, so I fundamentally disagree with that point. Let's listen to that point one more time.
Have a consistent accent on the pronunciation of your first language. To suggest that you must aim to have a consistent accent from a region, even though many native speakers don't, is foolish at best.
To suggest that you must have a consistent way that you speak, even though many many native speakers do not, is foolish at best. I kind of, again, fundamentally disagree with this premise because it sounds to me like an excuse to make mistakes, like a pass to make mistakes. There are, again, the kind of mistakes to begin with aren't going to be one-to-one. The kind of mistakes that you make as if you come from a stress accent language are going to be very different from the kind of mistakes that I think a lot of native speakers are going to make. But then again, on top of that, I think that even though there are many natives that do that, I think that that's not most natives. I think that that's definitely the overwhelming minority of natives, at least in my experience. Yeah, it just sounds like he's coping. I don't think that he's coping. I don't think that he's coping. I've watched this guy's entire video. It's that, and if you watch the entire video, he makes a lot of really good points that kind of tie back to this. Like if you just listen to this point in isolation, it might sound like he's coping or whatever, but he believes everything else that he says in the video. And if he believes that and all those other points are logical, then he's basically saying, well, he's coming from the premise of you don't need to study pitch accent anyway. And even if you did, natives make this kind of mistake, so it's kind of it's a null point anyway. But let's keep going. Let's keep going.
Exceedingly naughty at worst. I've spoken to native speakers who constantly make so-called pitch accent mistakes when they try to speak standard Japanese.
Let's listen to this very carefully. This point
Is foolish at best and exceedingly naughty at worst. I've spoken to native speakers who constantly make so-called pitch accent mistakes when they try to speak standard Japanese simply because they didn't grow up around Tokyo. So why should you care so much? In this one popular video which points out all the supposed pitch mistakes of advanced learners, you'll see that most of the comments from native speakers mention that many of the mistakes in the video they probably wouldn't have even noticed. I even found one comment from a southern Japanese person who said that if he/she were to speak standard Japanese, it would probably sound like many of the speakers in the video, and that if the speakers in the video had East Asian faces, he/she would probably assume they're Japanese. I didn't manage to find any comments from natives on this video extolling the importance of pitch accent.
Okay, I think that's fair. However, let's do something real quick. どこだったっけ? Yudai Japanese, I think it was like Yudai Japanese pitch accent. Okay, let's go to this real quick. Well, there's my video. Sorry, I'm unable to find that video right now, and it's going to, if I try and find it, I'm going to end up taking too much time. I don't know, maybe I can find it. Give me 1 second, please. Okay, I can't find it right now, so I'm just gonna give up. But basically, I think this is kind of a form of cherry picking. And what I mean by this is he said, natives again, kind of make mistakes. And in this video where Matt versus Japan was talking about how pitch accent, even advanced learners make pitch accent mistakes. Look, in the comments, there's a lot of Japanese people that say, I don't even care at all about this. And this pitch accent is not about sounding native is the name of the video. Is it? Okay. Anyway, what I've found actually is that people never cared about my pitch accent when I was studying Japanese until my pitch accent started to get good. And what I mean by that is that there was when I was learning Japanese at the very beginning of my Japanese studies, I was making pitch accent mistakes on a pretty regular basis, as well as other kinds of mistakes. I was making devoicing mistakes. I was saying the R sounds the incorrect way, in the same way that I still do very often. My rhythm was off in the same way that it's still a little bit off. However, once my pitch accent started to get significantly better, then Japanese people would correct my pitch accent even though I hadn't told them that I was studying pitch accent. What started to happen was that because my pitch accent got kind of better across the board, the pitch accent mistakes that I was making, people no longer felt like, well, it's like a lost cause to point out all the mistakes that he's making because he's making mistakes like all the time. It was much more like, okay, that's like 1 in like 25 or 1 in 50 rather than like, 1 in 5 or whatever it might be. 1 in 100 versus 1 in 10. And so I distinctly remember there was a time when I was studying Japanese at the University of Washington. Well, I was hanging out with an exchange student, and we were hanging out in the courtyard, I guess the nakaniwa, the quad of the University of Washington. And I said I had been tricking. I had been doing this martial arts thing that I used to do. And I said, karada ga itai, like my body hurts, because I had been tricking. and I had a bunch of injuries from that, and my body was hurting. And she said, "Karada janakute karada." And it was one of the first times that someone had corrected my pitch accent. And it started happening more and more frequently. And I didn't ask her to correct my pitch accent. I never even brought up that I was studying pitch accent. But this was after I got back from study abroad, and my pitch accent had significantly improved from the course that I took while I was doing study abroad. And so this is a friend that I had hung out with many times before, and she had never corrected my pitch accent in the past, but she was like, "That's a mistake. You're saying it the wrong way." And I was like, "Oh, thank you." And this started happening again on a more and more frequent basis once my pitch accent started to get better and better. Like if you say, again, I'm going to get flack for this, but I believe this. If you say the word for Japanese as Nihongo rather than Nihongo, then a Japanese person isn't going to correct your pitch accent because it's a very, very, this sounds disparaging, but I'm not trying to sound disparaging. It's just kind of what I think is fact. It's a fairly elementary mistake. And this is a mistake that, again, I think will probably get ironed out over time. But it's kind of like from a Japanese person's perspective, like, why would I even correct that? Because this kind of mistake happens so often. It would be, again, kind of like if we swap roles, like I'm not going to point out every single time a Japanese person switches their R and L sounds if they do that on a fairly regular basis. But if they only do it like once a week or something like that, and I know that they're interested in sounding native, I know that they're passionate about getting good at English, then when they do make a mistake, it's going to stand out a lot more, right? And in that circumstance, I would say, "Oh, you're saying that wrong." So it's kind of like that. Okay, so let's keep going.
Managed to find any comments from natives on this.
Oh, by the way, Mobek, when you start to get he Nihongo jozu with the worst pitch accent until you get so close to everyday Japanese, and yeah, people will point out details. Yeah, exactly. Like you'll get less compliments and more sticky, like people pointing out the mistakes that you make, the better you get. But let's keep going.
Video extolling the importance of pitch accent.
Sorry?
It's telling that this video was supposedly checked by someone born and raised in Tokyo. If it were a native speaker from somewhere more regional, there's a chance they wouldn't have even picked up on many of these so-called mistakes. Here's another thing. At the lower levels, knowing pitch accent won't give you any results, and yet the better you get, the less need you have for it. Let's call it the pitch paradox.
Let's listen to that again.
The better you get, the thing. At the lower levels, knowing pitch accent won't give you any results, and yet
Okay, I fundamentally disagree with this. Knowing pitch accent at the lower levels won't make any results. Again, I fundamentally disagree with this because I think that if anything, like most things, pitch accent in Japanese is kind of a case of diminishing returns, and that the most gains are made at the lower levels. And that if you learn even just like the 4 basic pitch accent patterns, which are atamadaka, nakadaka, odaka, and heibang, then you can immediately start to improve your spoken Japanese and get rid of a lot of the more egregious pitch accent mistakes. Again, some pitch accent mistakes are definitely more egregious than others, but most people that are studying Japanese and are still saying the word Nihongo as Nihongo, I bet most of those people would prefer to be saying it the correct way. And if you learn just a little bit, kind of like the basics of pitch accent, you can get rid of many of those more common mistakes. But let's see what he says, like his full argument.
The better you get, the less need you have for it. Let's call it the pitch paradox. At the lower levels, you're going to sound bad. There's no way around it, and you're probably going to be frequently misunderstood, regardless of whether you studied pitch or not. The better you...
Okay, I agree with this. I agree with this 100%. if you're at the lower level and you're making mistakes across the board with your grammar and your vocab and your pronunciation and your pitch accent and your devoicing, studying pitch accent by itself isn't going to be enough to suddenly make you sound like a Japanese god. That said, if pitch accent is one of the 10 things that you're consistently getting wrong, then it might be worth studying so that you can now only get nine things with the 9 remaining things. You can then address those.
However, the more natural you'll sound, regardless of whether you study pitch or not. The better you get, however, the more natural you'll sound and the less need you'll have to learn pitch, since you'll already be perfectly understood regardless of whether you make some so-called pitch mistakes. To put it simply, at lower levels, pitch is useless because you already sound bad, but at higher levels, it's useless because you already sound good. Pitch peddlers often bring up examples of foreigners who constantly mess up pitch and sound very unnatural as reasons why you should study pitch. But the people who actually sound really bad don't sound bad because they're just messing up pitch. They sound bad because they're messing up everything. The sound.
Okay, so I agree and disagree. Let's listen to what he said to that bit one more time.
As reasons why you should study pitch. But the people who actually sound really bad don't sound bad because they're just messing up pitch. They sound bad because they're messing up everything.
Okay, so people who sound really bad don't sound bad just because they're messing up pitch. They sound bad because they're messing up everything. Again, this is true. If you're messing up everything, then pitch accent is just one of many things. However, there are many people who get to, I would say, between intermediate and advanced, to the intermediate and advanced levels who, because they never study pitch accent and because they do more or less have their other bases covered when it comes to grammar or, again, vocab, they're no longer making the same kind of mistakes when it comes to the other aspects of their Japanese. Because pitch accent is the one thing that's usually never covered, suddenly those mistakes stand out a lot more. You see what I'm saying? So if you've never studied pitch accent and you've gone through a Japanese kind of curriculum course, a more traditional course, then of course, yeah, early on, everything is going to sound bad, but slower but surely, you're going to iron out different elements of your Japanese until you sound much more natural across the board. But because pitch accent specifically is usually never covered, the more natural the other aspects of your Japanese sound, the more unnatural that specific bit is going to sound. Now, excuse me, I would wager that the immersion guy would counter and say that, yes, but the better that you get, the more you can, again, acquire pitch accent naturally without studying it outright. And this is something that I think is both true and not true. There are some people who've got really good ears, or maybe because they've been waiting to do output, they've studied it in a very specific way. It's true. They get rid of most of their pitch accent mistakes in the long run, despite the fact that they don't study Japanese, that they don't study pitch accent. That being said, there are many other people, again, myself included, that pitch accent kind of becomes the one thing that, because they never studied it and because it's never brought up in any of the materials that they use to study Japanese, it comes across, oh, what's up? Richardo, if your goal isn't to speak Japanese like a native, you don't need to place so much importance on pitch accent. All depends on your end goal. Thank you very much for the input. I appreciate that. And as you guys know, as I spoke about at the beginning of this video, you got to think critically about this. I'm going to give you my thoughts on this. Richardo, my buddy, we made a video actually all about like the church of pitch accents. Should you study pitch accent or not? Richardo doesn't really think that it's worth studying. I think that it's worth it. I think that we can laugh about this, but I'm just kind of trying to, what would you say, raise awareness such that people can, again, hopefully make a more informed decision, whether that's to study pitch accent or to not study pitch accent. But again, Richardo, he's got peak content. If you like my content and you've never seen Richardo's content, his content is freaking hysterical. It's kind of similar to mine in the sense that we're both foreigners that make comedic content in Japanese, but his content is, I would say, a lot more visceral than mine, and he covers a lot of things that don't come up terribly often in my videos because, well, I'm married, and because of that, like, I don't make a lot of like jokes about like dating and stuff like that. But he's made like so many incredible videos about like dating as a foreigner in Japan, and like obviously Richardo, he's black, but like what it's like dating certain Japanese girls as like a black dude, and oh my god, hysterical. I'll tell you the truth. The first time I saw Richardo's content, I became so uncomfortable because I was like, oh my God, his content is so much better than mine. It's so much funnier than mine. But that's actually why I decided to reach out to him, because I was like, well, it's stupid to try and make enemies or to like try and push him down. I was like, if anything, I got to just, give him all the support possible and try and, just spread the love, so to speak. I'm never going to be, the best, and I have to like protect my position. It's like, yeah, let's give the people who are really talented the biggest platforms possible. So yeah, Richardo, I freaking love his content. Incredible. Check it out. I look forward to hanging out with you again. And oh, stop. But again, Richardo, he's got phenomenal Japanese, and he didn't study pitch accent. So, listen to him, listen to me, listen to some other people, make up your mind after hearing everyone. What I'm trying to do is just kind of talk about this particular video. Richardo, I look forward to seeing you again. Yeah, I'll be seeing you again for sure. Let's make it happen. Can't wait. All right, let's keep going.
Sounds, intonation, sentence structure, etc. Pitch accent is going to make little difference. Getting a lot of input will make all the difference.
Okay, again, I kind of agree and I kind of disagree, because if getting input was the only thing that mattered, then there would be a lot of people who studied using kind of the immersion method that never made pitch accent mistakes. And again, you're going to have to take this with a grain of salt, but like Matt versus Japan is someone who seems to have studied mostly with the immersion-based method and was still unable to develop correct pitch accent until he began studying that specifically. And that's kind of true for myself as well. I did take Japanese courses when I was in university from my second year, but before that, I was just I was listening to like Japanese tapes. So I had only ever been exposed to native Japanese. I hadn't been exposed to foreigners trying to speak Japanese. And yet, I still ended up saying a ton of words with the incorrect pitch accent. Because again, I think in the same way that Japanese people, because R and L aren't part of that language, and they can't hear the difference because of that, and they end up therefore making that mistake in their speech. Because pitch accent isn't part of English or other stress accent languages, of course, then there's going to be a lot of people that make those kind of mistakes when they speak Japanese, because it's something that most people can't hear. There's a lot of people that can hear it, but I would say that there's certainly the exception to the rule rather than the rule itself. Because again, there's a lot of foreigners out there that have been living in Japan for years and years, and some of them have phenomenal Japanese, and pitch accent is the only thing wrong with their Japanese. And other people have kind of pretty good Japanese, and their pitch accent is off, and other things are off as well. Let's keep going though.
Ironically, one of the most convincing cases I've heard to support the idea that pitch accent can be acquired naturally comes from another infamous pitch proselytizer. The Japanese learner Ken Cannon, in his interview with Matt vs. Japan, talked about his experience learning Japanese almost entirely through listening. Through this, he apparently attained a very accurate ability to produce the correct pitch in standard Japanese, whilst many of...
Okay, so this learner claims to have acquired 90% accurate pitch by learning through listening, and the words he got wrong were apparently those he hadn't heard as much. Okay, so again, if you're speaking with 90% accuracy, that still means that every 10 words, every 10th word that you say, you're potentially saying with the wrong pitch accent. And there's a lot of people that might be upset by that. I would categorize myself into that category. I wanted to get every word that I was saying correct to the extent that it was possible for me. And I think that there's a lot of people like that. They want to strive for more than 90% accuracy when it comes to pitch accent. And again, pitch accent isn't the only aspect of spoken Japanese. There's pronunciation, there's rhythm, there's, again, devoicing, etc., etc.
The words he learnt later through text or other means of conscious study, he tended to produce more erroneously. If you trust his story, and why wouldn't you, he's only the most trusted figure on the internet, then this means that learning with a focus on comprehensible input and immersion from the start, rather than conscious study, is the best way to naturally acquire pitch accent. And yet, almost in the same breath, he claims you need to study pitch accent to sound good. And the video...
Okay, I personally don't think that he's... What would you say? I'm just going to go over this because I think that if I try and get into this is going to get into kind of the drama kind of stuff that I don't want to get involved in. So I'm just going to keep going.
The video was released in the first place as a means of promoting
Yudai
his
Sensei. Hey, what's going on? How's it going? Thanks for stopping in. There was a video, Yudai Sensei が作った動画の中で、確かなんかこう、一部の言葉を、なかなかではなくて、平板で発音したら、何か言おうとして途中でやめたように聞こえる。There was a video that Yudai Sensei made. Yudai Sensei, another Japanese YouTuber, he said that in his video, he said that there are some words that if you say with the incorrect pitch accent, it sounds like you're starting to say one thing, but then kind of like stop speaking, despite the fact that you're not doing that. It's just by the nature of saying it with the wrong pitch accent, it starts to sound like you're about to say something fundamentally different. はい、あります。ちょっと待ってください。はい、お願いします。ありがとうございます。Also, certain words could be misunderstood if you mess up pitch, like cycle and cycle. Yeah, that's true. That's certainly true. The thing is, when it comes to pitch accent, the argument that people won't understand you if you don't have correct pitch accent, this is fundamentally wrong. It's like saying that you won't understand a Japanese person speaking English if they mix up their R's and their L's. You will. You'll still understand what they're saying 90% of the time, if not closer to 99% of the time. So let's give the devil his due, right? Even if a Japanese person is messing up their R's and L's, and even if I'm messing up my pitch accent, you're still, the person on the other end is still gonna understand most of what you're saying, if not all of what you're saying. It's a matter of not whether or not they can understand you, but to the degree to which you would like to sound as native as you possibly can. That's kind of the issue at hand. Okay. Sorry, I asked this a few times already, but I want to hear your opinion, Dogen. But like, what do you recommend for people like me who are at a high level but with poor pitch accent? As you might guess, I would suggest that you study pitch accent. Because again, there are a lot of people like yourself who have studied Japanese for several years, but because pitch accent was the one thing that didn't come up in their curriculum, it's like the one thing that didn't develop at the same speed as their rhythm, their pronunciation with regards to most of the other sounds, their vocab, their grammar, their reading abilities. Oftentimes, not all learners, but there's a fair amount of learners, again, my past self included, where it's like the pitch accent is the one thing that kind of stands out. Again, this is not everyone. But if you feel like this could be you, as I felt like this could be me, I would definitely suggest studying pitch accent. Okay, we need pitch accent for those who are advanced already too. For example, for me, it's hard to hear the difference between sato and sato. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, both of those are pretty difficult because there are many names in Japanese like Saito that are kind of similar in structure to Sato. And then Sato is when this word sugar, the second word there, like this is a good example of a kind of word that even if you mispronounce it, in 99% of circumstances, people will understand what you're saying. But also at the same time, unless you study pitch accent, I would argue that there's a high probability that you're going to mispronounce that word for years. It's kind of like the word natto. It's so hard to say natto correctly with the correct pitch accent unless you've been studying for a very long time or unless you've studied pitch accent, because it has kind of a unique structure. And this is true for like imoto, et cetera, et cetera. Let's keep going though.
Priced.
Oh, okay. Dogen, one big thing is that also every person understands foreign accents to a different degree. My peers and I live in a community with many immigrants, so we generally understand accents better. Okay, I'm going to go on a little mini rant here, actually. I don't think that I said this earlier. I said this earlier when I was trying to record this video before I was doing the live stream. Actually, I'm going to save this for later. Sorry.
Private pitch
Let's
course,
keep going.
demonstrating yet another example of the very naughty behavior from some of the pitch promoters on the internet. Whether pitch pursuers actually sound more native than non-pitch accent studiers is a point of contention which I'll explore further in the video, but for now, let's assume.
Okay, Yudai Sensei, pitch accent is not about saying native. No, 3分3秒。ちょっと待ってください。Let's check this out. これかな？これじゃなかったんですけど、まあ一応これを見てみましょう。
科目は英語です。長文というかもう
この活動を始めてからよく言われるんですけど、ピッチアクセントを勉強することが、つまりネイティブスピーカーのような発音を目指してるからやるみたいな。まあ要するに私がですよ、すべての日本語学習者に京都って言葉がありますよね。で、大学ってことってそういう役割があるんですよ。で、私はこれ
So I'm going to translate what he's saying in just a second, okay?
は京都って言葉がありますよね。で、大学って言葉があったら、京都大学でアクセント変わります。京都下がって大学上がりますよね。なんですけれども、2つくっつくと、京都上がって大学で下がります。で、じゃあ、例えばなんですけど、日本人が喋ってるの聞いてて、京都って聞いたら、日本人はすぐに、なんか後ろに続くんだな、京都大学とか、京都駅とか、京都なんたらかんたらみたいな感じはするんですよね。っていう感じで、まあ、アクセントの変化が文の切れ目、単語の切れ目を分かりやすくして、意味を聞き取りやすくしてくれるっていう、そういう効果があるんですよね。で、これは別に方言変わっても同じです。関西弁だろうが、
Yeah, this is a really great point. So, basically what he's saying in this video is that it's not just about saying the individual words with the correct accent. He's saying that because pitch accent can change based on the structure, that if you're getting the pitch accent wrong, it can make things harder for the person that's listening to you. It can introduce a little bit more listening friction for the person on the other end. And what he says is that, for example, if you say the word for the capital or the old capital of Japan, Kyoto, it's pronounced like that, Kyoto, with the accent at the beginning, Kyoto. But if you say that word and combine it with the word university, which is pronounced daigaku, then you don't say Kyoto daigaku, you say Kyoto daigaku. The pitch accent of the word changes. Yeah? And so if you say it one way, if you say it as Kyoto and a Japanese person hears you, then they're starting to anticipate you saying Kyoto as a word within a compound. They're unconsciously preparing to hear you say something in a specific way. And it just makes it a little bit easier for them to understand everything that you're saying. But if you what would you say? This is going to sound like an exaggeration, but if you betray their expectations and you just say it with the wrong pitch accent, and it's as if it was going to be in the compound, but it actually wasn't, then it's just kind of like one little thing that it makes it a little bit more difficult for the native speaker to understand what you're saying. Will they still understand what you're saying in the majority of circumstances? Yeah, definitely. However, if there's enough of this listening friction introduced, then it can result in not understanding what you're saying. Again, most of the time, if pitch accent is the only thing that you're getting wrong, you're still going to be understood. But if you're getting pitch accent wrong in addition to other things, then there is going to be a much higher probability that you will not be understood. I think that the argument that even if your pitch accent if you don't study pitch accent, Japanese people will still understand you. I think that that's still correct. But I also think that it's correct to say that if you do study pitch accent, you're going to sound more natural and easier to understand across the board. Okay, thank you very much, Yudai Sensei. じゃあ行きましょう。
Assume that studying pitch accent will improve your accent, but even so, when you consider this next possible drawback is a point of contention which I'll explore further in the video. But for now, let's assume that studying pitch accent will improve your accent. But even
Okay, yes, let's assume that studying pitch accent will improve your pitch accent.
So
or
when you consider
your naturalness, your ability to be understood.
this next possible drawback, is it really worth it? Pitch accent could hurt your spoken fluency.
Okay. This is a great point. Let's kind of listen to him for a couple minutes.
Touched on this briefly in a previous video, but to put it succinctly, the more you learn and obsess over pitch, the more you'll be conscious of it while speaking. This consciousness translates into extra mental effort while speaking, which will potentially slow you down and make it harder to communicate. I speak from experience. Even though I never studied pitch accent rules and patterns, simply by having forced myself to pay attention to it for so long while listening makes me overly aware of the intonation when I try to speak. Speaking a foreign language already requires so much mental energy. Why would you want to burden yourself with even more cognitive load? Is it really worth potentially harming your spoken fluency just to make your accent sound a bit closer to a native? That's for you to decide. In a way, the pitch accent craze is just another symptom of the obsession with having to sound native.
Okay, so Kai Search has said in the chat, this is just a growing pain though. I would say exactly. Everything that the immersion guy has just said, I agree with 100%. 100%. If you start learning pitch accent, it's going to make other aspects of your Japanese less natural because you're going to become conscious of pitch accent when you're speaking. This is 100% true. I agree 100%. However, there's also a pretty good, the thing is, this is true for everything. The very first time that you try and say a new grammar point in Japanese, you're going to be a lot more conscious of it, and you're going to slow down when you say it. It's like, okay, I learned this grammar point in class today. I'm going to try and use it in this conversation. I've never used it before. I have to think a lot. I have to slow down. I have to really take my time. Are the particles in the right location? Is everything okay? Okay, I think it is. Yep, I did it. Now, maybe even if you did it the correct way, it might have a net negative because it slowed you down so much. It's the exact same thing with pitch accent. When you begin studying pitch accent, because you've never studied it before, you're going to be conscious of it. You're going to be highly conscious of it, and it's going to slow you down. Definitely. That being said, again, it's very much like grammar or vocab or whatever. It's a growing pain, and it's something that, like, you could make the same argument with, grammar and vocab. You could say, well, I can communicate with just these 200 words, and the more words that I try and memorize, it'll just slow me down when I speak, so I'm not going to bother memorizing them. You could make the same argument for that. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, but you can work through it. And I think that the best way, I actually address this kind of head on in my pitch accent course. I make a sports analogy, and what I say is, you need to approach pitch accent like a drill, like a sports drill. So think about the sport basketball, okay? If you're thinking about dribbling when you're in the middle of a game, then, and that's all you're thinking about, you're going to get screwed up. You're going to trip yourself up because when you're in the middle of a game, there's 15 different things that you need to think about. You need to think about the stop clock. You need to think about how many points your team needs to score. You need to think about who has possession of the ball. You need to think about who's guarding you, what their skills are, what play might be the best play for that particular moment, et cetera, et cetera. And if you're only focusing on dribbling, that's just going to trip you up. And it's the exact same thing with pitch accent. If you're just thinking about pitch accent when you're speaking and you become obsessed with it, it's definitely going to have a negative effect on a negative net effect on the naturalness of your spoken Japanese. That being said, in the same way that you can do like dribbling drills or like free throw shooting drills when you're practicing basketball, you can do the same exact thing with pitch accent. You can study pitch accent very consciously when you're alone and you're not actually having a conversation. You can kind of drill it and listen to yourself and compare it to natives and do that kind of thing. And then this is what I always tell people, do that and be conscious of pitch accent when you're doing those drills. But then when you're actually having a conversation, literally tell yourself before the conversation, I don't care at all about pitch accent. Because what will happen then is there will be some of those gains that you made that will translate unconsciously, and you will be able to improve your Japanese your Japanese pitch accent average, batting average, without having to consciously think about it because you put in the time and effort behind closed doors, right? If you never studied it, then you wouldn't get to that point, I would argue. I'm not sure if the immersion guy would argue that or not. But again, it's like, if counterpoint, parking your brain by watching the spin of a ball and freeing your unconscious mind to just play the game. All these I learned Japanese 2.5 minutes. So Dogen, do you still actively think about pitch accent or has it become subconscious? So I would say it's almost entirely subconscious, but it's kind of weird for me because if I'm having a conversation, it's subconscious. But if I'm making a comedic video, it's much more conscious because the lines have been decided beforehand. In the same way that right now I'm speaking without a script, if I'm doing this, I don't have time to think about like the intonation of my English, right? But if I'm trying to read off of a script that I've written beforehand, I'm going to be a lot more conscious of that, right? All of the Japanese videos that I make, like you guys might have seen the, what's up, Tokyo Sam? You guys might have seen that video that I just put out with Erusha-san, the Japanese, with the voice actress. It's about ChatGPT. That video, it's like a 4 or 5 minute single take where I just say a bunch of lines and I kind of go back and forth with her. But I was very conscious of the pitch accent of those words because I wanted to get them right and because I had written them down beforehand. But like in the middle of a conversation, I don't care about it at all. And again, if anything, I consciously tell myself, don't worry about it. And I trust the instincts, the muscle memory, the pitch accent muscle memory that I built up many years ago when I was studying pitch accent. So is it true that studying pitch accent could hurt your spoken fluency? Yeah, not only could it hurt your spoken fluency, it will hurt your spoken fluency if you become obsessed with it and it's the only thing that you think about. That being said, if you study it and you put in some time and effort and you approach it in the same way that you approach, like again, like a dribbling drill or like a free throw drill, it will only have a positive benefit because like Kai Search said earlier, it kind of becomes like a growing pain. Like it hurts for a little bit and it can be particularly, what would you say, shocking if you've been studying Japanese for a long time and Japanese is very important to you to learn that you might have said a fair number of words with the incorrect pitch accent. But if you put in a little bit of time and effort and you do study pitch accent, then it can make a tremendous difference to alleviate those mistakes, to get rid of those mistakes, and you'll slow down a little bit while you're going through those growing pains, but once the growing pains are over, you'll be at a better point than you were when you began with. So yes, pitch accent will slow you down. It's going to hurt, but I think that most people, not everyone, would benefit from studying it.
But what about feeling native? To me, how native you feel when you speak is a far greater indicator of how close you are to a native speaker than whether you...
I think that this is true and also not true, because how native you feel when speaking is highly subjective. You might feel like you're super native when in fact you're not. And I think that we've all had that conversation of, we've all been in that situation where there's like that one person in the Japanese classroom that thinks that their Japanese is way better than everyone else's because they watch a lot of anime, and then they open their mouth and they say something ridiculous and stupid, and everyone else realizes that they're kind of actually making a fool of themselves, but they say it with so much confidence because they watch like a lot of anime or whatever. And again, this is true for me as well. I remember vividly, I had this experience during my first year during study abroad, where I think I might have told this story before, but my Japanese teacher she was asking us students how our weekend was. And she said like, Thomas-san, 週末はどうでした? And so like my friend Thomas, he was like, 楽しかったです. And then she was like, okay, Catherine, どうでした? はい、スーパーに行って買い物をしました。楽しかったです。Or 普通でした. Like it was normal. I went shopping. And then she came to me, and this is how I answered. She said, じゃあ、Dogenさん. My name's Kevin. She said, ケビンさん、週末どうでした? And I said, すっげー楽しかった. And I knew that I was saying that with better pronunciation than all of my classmates. And because of that, I said it with a lot of confidence. And I did say it, again, in a way that was, again, I had better pronunciation, but I said, because I used informal Japanese, it made me sound actually way worse than all my classmates. So I'm kind of both proving and disproving the immersion guy's, the point that he's making right here, which is that how native you feel when speaking is a better indicator of how native like the sounds actually are. You need to learn the rules so that you can know when you're breaking them. Yeah? So like, I didn't know the weight of formal and informal Japanese at the time that I made that mistake. I just thought, well, I think that I sound really native when I say this. So I'm going to say, すっげー楽しかった. And I was like, hell yeah. Look at me. Look how natural my Japanese sounds. And my teacher immediately reprimanded me. She said, それは先生に対して使う言葉じゃないです. Or like, ではありません. Like, you can't use that word when you're speaking with your teacher. 使っちゃダメです. I can't remember exactly what she said, but I ended up getting embarrassed. And it was all because, again, I felt really native when I was saying it, but I actually didn't know what I was talking about. And this is very true for a lot of people at different levels of their Japanese studies. And this is, again, why I'm actually very passionate about teaching pitch accent. Because you might be because there were so many instances where I was making mistakes with my Japanese, and I didn't realize I was making those mistakes, and I didn't have a way of seeing whether or not, determining whether or not I was making those mistakes. I was trying to learn to arm myself to prevent those mistakes from happening so that I wasn't just like kind of walking around blindly when it comes to this particular thing. Again, it kind of comes down to you have to learn the rules in order to know when you're breaking them. You have to learn the rules to know how to break them. I think that's the correct quote. And I've only now learned that your name is Kevin. So again, but at the same time, I definitely agree. And I've got like an entire video up on YouTube that's free. That's called Japanese Speaking Style. And it's all about things besides pitch accent. It's all about kind of the vibe that you give off when you're speaking Japanese. Again, it's like a 20-minute video. Let's see. Dogen speaking style. Yeah, so the title of the video is Should Your Japanese Voice Sound Different? And it's all about this. It's all about the vibe that you should give off when you're speaking Japanese. So that's what this video is about. I just posted it in chat. Again, it's
and we're back. The team
like a 20-minute video. It's free. You can check it out if you might be interested in that. But let's keep going. Oops. What's going on? I can't click on this. Hello? Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch windows real quick and I'm going to close this. YouTube. Here we go. 1 second, guys. I might just be getting like a slow internet connection right now. Can you guys still hear what I'm saying? Not sure what's going on. Hopefully I can alleviate this in 1 second. Yep, okay, cool. Let me just close Safari then real quick. Force quit. Okay. So please give me 1 second, guys. Okay, still live. Give me 1 second. I'm reopening the video real quick. Okay, and now I got to go back to the reaction screen, and rather than capturing Yuta's video, we're going to say pitch accent is useless. Okay, there we go.
Native-like in any sense of the word. Natives are able to speak spontaneously without having a conscious awareness of the rules and details. The more you obsess over pitch, the further away you become from the way an actual native speaks, even if you manage to artificially make your accent sound closer to a native.
Yudai.
Regardless of how native your accent is, if you can't string a short sentence together without deliberating about things like pitch or grammar, you've already lost to a 2-year-old native.
Yeah, and again, I agree with this. But you could make the same argument with regards to any aspect of Japanese. Why not stop studying grammar at a beginner or intermediate level? Because the more grammar you learn, the more you're going to have to think about which grammar is the best for that situation. Yeah, it's a growing pain. And the more that you train that muscle, the more that you'll be able to use that muscle without thinking about it. It's again, because I think that a lot of Japanese learners, Japanese is so important to them because they're weebs like me. It's like when you learn that you were saying the word like Japanese wrong all along, it can be quite like harmful, like depressing. Like, you got to be kidding me. I was saying the word Japanese wrong. Like I was saying Nihongo instead of Nihongo. That can be depressing, and that can lead to this mindset of, okay, I need to make sure I never make another pitch accent mistake ever again. And that's fundamentally the wrong mindset. You want to study, I think that it's good to study pitch accent, but not to obsess over pitch accent. You want to study it such that you can get good, speak with good pitch accent without thinking about it. Rather than, again, kind of just like burying your head in the sand and being like, it'll be okay if I just ignore
sounding native instead of feeling native, and thereby being able to communicate more freely and effectively, all seems rather superficial to me.
Yeah, again, Kai Search says, when you don't build up your muscle, of course, you're going to be exhausted sooner. Absolutely.
Someone who's so obsessed with appearing healthy and looking good that they'll try everything from beauty products to diet pills to plastic surgery, all while eating nothing but junk food, sleeping 3 hours a night, and never exercising.
Okay, so Firewell says, is it okay to say this immersion guy is theoretically correct, but realistically you have to deliberately study to fix all the things you don't learn or you mislearned passively? It depends on how you studied and your own personal situation. And what I mean by that is, I think a lot of people, they want a master key when it comes to learning Japanese. They want to hear one answer. They want the expert to say, this is all you need to do, and if you do this, your Japanese will be perfect, just like me, just like this person or whatever. But the truth is, there are so many different people that have studied so many different ways, and many of them have reached similar levels of very, very high fluency with fundamentally different approaches, okay? And you can't give a one-size-fits-all solution to this problem, in my opinion. You can't say, studying pitch accent, you have to study pitch accent, and here's why. And you can't say, you shouldn't study pitch accent, and here's why. I think, again, it kind of comes down to the situation that you're in, your specific goals, and your specific abilities. Like, do you have really good ears? Can you already pick up on pitch accent without studying it explicitly? Are you already coming from a pitch accent language? Again, unfortunately, even in theory, it's impossible to say because there are so many factors at play. But let's keep going.
If you strive so hard to appear native, even if it means potentially sabotaging your ability to produce spontaneous language in a way similar to a native, what is it but an exercise in vanity? The argument could even be made that having a 100% native accent isn't a prerequisite for being native in a language. As an example to illustrate this point, there were two bilingual acquaintances I had in university. One had come to Australia from Taiwan as a small boy, and the other from Iran. Both had been in an English-speaking environment since the age of around 5 or 6, had completed all their education in English, and both were unquestionably native, probably possessing a greater ability in English compared to the language of their respective home countries. And yet both had a slight foreign accent when they spoke. There are many potential reasons for this, but whatever the reason, I see examples of this as a strong case for the argument that having native ability in a language does not necessarily equate to having a native accent. The point is they could both understand and use the language in the same way a native would, even with a slight foreign accent. This is a point I really want to stress because I feel it's an important point that I haven't heard anyone else make. That is the difference between feeling native and sounding native. Sure, he might have point himself from achieving the ability to speak like an actual native would. But what about the person listening to you? Won't natives find it annoying to listen to you if you have incorrect pitch? That brings me to my next point. Native speakers really don't give a fuck.
This is the point that I actually disagree with most. It's funny because most of the other points that he's brought up in the video, I think it's kind of like, yeah, there's truth in that. Or like at the very least, like I can see that argument. But I kind of fundamentally disagree with this native speakers don't give an F. But let's hear this out a little bit.
When you speak to a non-native English speaker who has incredibly natural sounding English but occasionally says a word with a different stress or intonation to the dialect you're used to hearing, is it jarring for you? Do you negatively judge their intelligence? Does it annoy you and make you want to avoid them? Does it make you want to curse their name and bring misery upon them and their posterity 10 generations henceforth? If you're not a compulsive, obsessive phonetics nerd, the chances are you probably weren't even aware of these mistakes.
Okay, this is the point that I disagree with. And I think what I mean by that is that I think that he's kind of conflating two things. He's saying on one hand, native speakers don't care, and on the other hand, he's saying native speakers won't notice. And I think that it's fundamentally different. These are two fundamentally different things. And it's also kind of separate altogether from the main issue, in my opinion, which is that, again, if you are listening to a Japanese speaker who speaks basically perfect English, but they're mixing up their R's and L's, he's absolutely right that when you hear that, you don't care at all that they're going to be mixing those up every now and then, right? But that's not to say that you won't notice. But the bigger point is that it's not whether about you as the listener care, it's about whether you as the speaker care. Because there's a good chance that even if you're listening to a Japanese person speak English and they're mixing up their R's and L's, there's a good chance that even if you don't care that every now and then they mix up their R and L, I bet that if they've got good English, that they care that they're mixing up their R's and L's and that they would prefer to avoid making that mistake if possible. And it's kind of the same thing with pitch accent. It's like, yes, of course, yeah, Japanese people, they don't care if you're going to be making a pitch accent mistake in the same way that like most people don't care if you're walking around and you've got like a big pimple on your forehead or something like that. Like we only really care about ourselves. If the person that you're talking to isn't going to care about the pimple on your forehead, only you are going to care about that. But if you can get rid of that, you might want to. It's very similar. The Japanese person might want to get rid of that R and L mistake if there's a means of doing so, and you might want to get rid of your pitch accent mistakes if you are making pitch accent mistakes. But the point the immersion guy is making is that learners should not care that much in the first place. That could be the point that he's making, but I don't think that that's his place to say. I think that people can choose what people have different language learning goals. Again, like there are some people like Matt versus Japan who I would argue has better Japanese across the board than me. And he's super, super hardcore. And I'm kind of like a rung down on that ladder where it's like, my Japanese is pretty good, and I don't make a ton of pitch accent mistakes when I speak, but I make more pitch accent mistakes than someone like Matt. And I'm okay with that because I kind of do something fundamentally different than someone like Matt. Like I make comedic videos about learning Japanese, and that's kind of my thing. So it's more important to me that I'm also good at creative writing and telling jokes and that kind of thing. So I don't think it's, maybe he is making the argument that learners should not care about this thing in the first place, but many learners do care about that. And even if someone on the internet tells them that they shouldn't, ultimately, I think it's their decision. And again, you need to, sorry, I'm not talking to you directly, Stan. I'm talking to everyone at this point, which is you need to come to the conclusion based off of by yourself, right? You got to think about what are my language goals? What are my abilities? What stage am I at with my Japanese learning process? And ultimately, you can make a decision based off of that. And we all have slightly different goals. Some people would put off, again, output for a year or even 2 years if it makes them sound 1% better. But there are many people that would rather start speaking sooner than later. And for those people, it might be beneficial to study pitch accent or a different aspect of spoken Japanese like devoicing. Okay, let's keep going.
Sure, it might give off a whiff of slight exoticism, but it most likely didn't even register consciously because you were too busy actually listening to what the other person was saying and communicating like a regular human being instead of obsessing over and nitpicking every small mistake you could find. After living in Japan...
Yeah, again, I agree with this. Like, the person on the listening end doesn't typically care, provided that they can understand what you're saying. But it's never really been about the person on the listening end. It's about you, the speaker. What do you want to do? What are your goals?
Working for half a year in a totally Japanese environment and witnessing many second language Japanese speakers communicating with natives, I've come to realize just how little people actually give a fuck about your accent, and in particular pitch accent. Sure, if you have a thick accent and your pronunciation is awkward and hard to understand in places, people will notice, and it probably won't be as easy to speak with you. But anyone who's gotten enough input and has used the right methods to acquire the language will not have this problem, as they will sound totally understandable and sufficiently natural. Even if you do manage to sound perfect, some people might be impressed for the first 10 seconds, and you might get a few words of praise that titillate your ego and make you feel special, but after that, no one will care. If you're lurking around in the depths of the Japanese learning community, it's easy to forget this simple fact because the Japanese
I agree with this point for why this video is complete garbage live stream. I don't think that this video is complete garbage at all. I think that he brings up a lot of really good points. As again, I agree with this point. It's that there are many points that I think it's not as simple as, in my opinion, as what's being laid out in the video. And I'm about to get to probably the biggest example of this in a second.
Community seems to have an unhealthy fetish with sounding 100% native. But when you actually become able to communicate and use the language, you wake up and realize the real world doesn't at all reflect the fetishistic fixations and fantasies of phonetics fanatics and pitch persuaders. There are so many facets of communication whose importance overshadow pitch to an astronomical degree. And yet why do so many people fixate on such minor bits of rubbish like pitch? What you say, the words you use, the tone of your voice.
Again, people like myself focus on pitch because it's typically the one thing that's not taught. It's basically as simple as that. We see a common mistake that comes up fairly often, and we think that there's a pretty practical solution to that, and I've tried to provide that solution. And I definitely don't think that we should just be obsessing about pitch accent all the time. It's that I think that this particular phenomena can be alleviated by taking this particular approach. But yeah, we shouldn't obsess over pitch accent. Yeah, saying pitch is rubbish is denying the art and languages. Well, I'm going to get to this point in a second, so let's keep going.
These are all
Again, I'm really trying to avoid twisting this guy's words because I think he's making a lot of good points that are a lot deeper than many of the arguments against studying pitch accent that I've heard in the past. So I don't want to dunk on this guy or anything like that. I think, if anything, he's done a really good job articulating these arguments. And if he makes a follow-up video, I would encourage all you guys to go watch it.
Factors that are unbelievably more important than saying a hadakanaka word with an atamabaka pitch. Even non-linguistic factors, your facial expression, your movements, your appearance, have an arguably larger impact than verbal ones.
Maybe. Again, this is it's very situational. Again, yeah. It's very situational. It depends on the word that you're saying. It depends on the circumstances. Of course, if you're, very combative in the way that you're speaking, that's going to be much more of an issue than pitch accent. But if you've gone through a Japanese course that kind of talks about, being modest and that kind of thing and kind of the basics of Japanese culture, then you might have already started to learn these things.
Your speech is only a part of your overall impression. Your accent is only a part of your speech, and your pitch accent is only an even smaller part of your accent. It's only one.
Yeah, this is true. Pitch accent is one part of your spoken speech. It's one part of your accent. And this is also why pitch accent is only one of the things that I try and teach on my Patreon course. I've got many videos that are about pitch accent. I've got many videos that are about like the R sounds. I've got many videos that are about the sound, the hatsuon. I'll post this in chat right now. I've got, I think, 2 or 3 videos about this particular sound because this sound is very difficult to, well, it's quite complicated. Whether or not it's difficult kind of depends on, your own native language. But yeah, pitch accent is just one thing, and it's one of the things that I try and cover. But again, I think it's kind of, we're not obsessed with pitch accent. It's that we decide to cover it specifically because it's the one thing that was never covered. But I also teach I teach pitch accent, I teach pronunciation, I teach devoicing, I teach many aspects, and pitch accent is one thing. So it's absolutely true that it's just one aspect of your Japanese. Great point.
One small ingredient of one small dish among many at a grand buffet. I have seen and interacted with many Japanese-speaking foreigners here. I've even met people with near-perfect accents, and I can tell you that the best speaker of Japanese I met was a Chinese guy who, despite having a Chinese accent, wasn't afraid to speak and wasn't obsessed with sounding perfect. Sure, he might have had a slight Chinese accent, and sometimes he pronounced words wrong, but he was able to speak incredibly fluidly and effortlessly, had many Japanese friends, and lived his life almost exclusively in Japanese. And above all, he was a good conversationalist. He has attained a level that can only be dreamed of by most of the pitch pursuers. In Tokyo at least, I've noticed that there are more foreigners with very natural, nearly perfect accents in Japanese than you would expect, and most natives aren't really impressed by that. For many people, it won't even register. One thing people are vastly more impressed by is an ability to read, because there are many foreigners who are extremely fluent but still struggle with kanji. It's so easy.
Yeah, I mean, this is very true. I think that it's more impressive if you're really good at learning Japanese than if your pitch accent is better than most other people. That's definitely true. And it's also definitely true that, again, there are a ton of foreigners that live in places like Tokyo that have phenomenal Japanese. I can't name them, but there are many people on YouTube right now. My friend Ananya is one good example. She's American, but her family is, I believe, from India, and she speaks better Japanese across the board than I do. And I'm pretty sure that she never studied pitch accent. But again, I think it kind of comes down to, is she an exception to the rule or is she the rule? Are most people that have never studied pitch accent, do they have phenomenal Japanese across the board, or do they have a fair number of mistakes that come up fairly regularly? It's hard to say. Again, it's like, how big is your sample size? Exactly where are you pulling these people from? And because pitch accent is one thing that a fair number of people struggle with, it's one thing that I think is worth learning for many different people. It's not worth learning for some people. And it's definitely accurate to say that there are tons of foreigners in Tokyo that have better sounding Japanese than me or other people that study pitch accent, or I don't know, even potentially teach pitch accent, that have never even studied it. Like there's this girl, I think she's from Austria. She's got, I want to say like blonde hair, and her spoken Japanese is phenomenal. Again, like Ananya's spoken Japanese, phenomenal. But most people that have studied Japanese don't end up that good, even if they take the same Japanese learning approach. Some people will, some people won't. Some people would benefit from learning pitch accent, and some people, again, depending on how good your ears are, depending on what other languages you speak besides maybe just English, these are all factors that play into ultimately, again, how natural your native Japanese is going to sound. Because one of the things that I believe Ananya said is that there's a fair amount of overlap between, I can't remember the exact name of the Indian language that she's also a native speaker of, Telugu or something. I can't remember the exact name, but she said there's a lot of overlap between Japanese and that language. And because of that, there were certain aspects of Japanese that came naturally to her. But we don't, Telugu. Yeah, not all of us have these luxuries. And again, it's definitely not a one size fits all approach. So there's a lot of truth to what this guy's saying, but again, it's not, I don't like the terms, like, what would you say? Like, pitch accent is like rubbish, or it's like, it's foolish to study, etc. Because the existence of one person who speaks Japanese perfectly without studying pitch accent does not refute many other people who have studied Japanese for just as long, if not longer, but still make a fair number of pitch accent mistakes. So let's keep going.
To get swept up in all the pitch paranoia. It's worrying to think that there's some defect in your accent that you're not aware of, but is plain and obvious to those around you. That there's some...
Yes, exactly. It is worrying. And this again kind of comes back to what I talked about earlier when it comes to pitch accent could hurt your spoken fluency. What he was talking about here when he said that it's very worrying and depressing when you realize that you might have been making a fair number of mistakes all along. And that is often what leads to the hyper pitch paranoia that he's talking about. It's just a matter of whether or not you decide to let yourself become paranoid about that, as opposed to addressing it in a logical way and training that muscle a little bit, as well as all the other muscles that you need to train in order to sound good at Japanese.
Disease in your speech that you're not even aware of, and everyone you talk to is secretly judging you because of it. Just know, they really don't give a fuck. But let's say for some reason,
Oops, sorry.
or rather, you really want to sound native.
Oh, oops. Sorry
So
about
the other
that,
day
guys.
I was going through some really
Hello everyone. If you're a Japanese, the majority of
Okay.
in Japanese than you would expect, and most natives aren't really impressed by that. For many people, it won't even register. One thing people are vastly more impressed by is an ability to read, because there are many foreigners who are extremely fluent but still struggle with kanji. It's so easy to get swept.
Okay. There's kind of one other big point that I want to talk about when it comes to pitch accent, and this was actually kind of more related to what came up earlier in the video, that kind of deals with native speakers. Maybe we can find that section real quick, actually.
Of that word.
Here we
It's
go.
easy to overlook the fact that most of it is actually. Because emphasis is put on the mistakes, it's easy to overlook the fact that most of it is actually correct, and just how minor and subtle many of those so-called mistakes are. Secondly, many of those so-called mistakes don't necessarily sound non-native. Many times it just sounds like a different pronunciation of that word or phrase that would be preferred in a different region somewhere outside of Tokyo. Sure, there are some people who claim that it's bad to have a mixed pronunciation and accent and should focus on the pronunciation.
This is a great point. In the chat, Xantho, I'm reminded of the point where some composers can make great music without learning music theory. That doesn't mean it's bad or useless to learn music theory. Exactly. Couldn't have said it better myself.
From a specific region for the sake of consistency. Anyone who claims this is a naughty boy who deserves a good spanking, because this is nothing but baseless fanaticism. The only people in any language who have a pure specific regional accent are those who spent their lives in a specific region. Anyone who moved around when they were growing up or had significant exposure to other regional accents will end up with a mixed accent in their native language to varying degrees. And even then, there will be accent variation based on so many factors: age, sex, personality. Hell, even knowing a foreign language can have subtle impacts on the pronunciation of your first language. To suggest that you must aim to have a consistent accent from a region, even though many native speakers don't, is foolish at best, and exceedingly naughty at worst. I've spoken to native speakers who constantly make so-called pitch accent mistakes when they try to speak standard Japanese simply because they didn't grow up around Tokyo. So why should you care when
Okay.
they try to speak standard
This
Japanese?
is the point that
simply
I was
because
trying
they
to
didn't-
get to.
Who constantly
Please listen to this very carefully.
make so-called pitch accent mistakes when they try to speak standard Japanese.
Sorry.
To suggest that you must aim to have a consistent accent from a region, even though many native speakers don't, is foolish at best,
Okay, listen very carefully to what he's about to say.
and exceedingly naughty at worst. I've spoken to native speakers who constantly make so-called pitch accent mistakes when they try to speak standard Japanese simply because
When they try to speak standard Japanese, I've come across many native Japanese learners who make pitch accent mistakes when they try to speak standard Japanese. This is a really big point that I really wanted to talk about in the video that's related to this point later, which is that native speakers really don't give an F. I disagree with this because it's as if to say Japanese people don't care at all about people who are speaking Japanese with different dialects or whatever. But if that's true, then why are people trying to speak with standard Japanese to begin with, right? So he's just said that he's come across many native speakers who are trying to speak standard Japanese. Why are they trying to speak standard Japanese as opposed to the dialect where they're from? It's because, of course, there are certain things that perceptions of people that other people hold when it comes to the way that they sound when they speak a certain dialect. And this is true for all languages. This is why I think, who was it? Bill Clinton? I think it was Bill Clinton who, I think, was he from Kentucky? And he did like vocal training in order to, I believe, get rid of his kind of Kentucky accent, such that he could appeal to more people, to the broader American audience. There are certain things that people will think if you sound a certain way when you're speaking Japanese, even among native speakers. And to say that Japanese natives don't care at all about pitch accent mistakes that another native speaker might make, well, it's true that they don't really care about the mistakes, so to speak. To say that Japanese people don't differentiate between like one dialect or another, or that they kind of feel the same, maybe that's not what the immersion guy was trying to say here. Maybe I'm kind of over speculating. But I think that this is worth, Arkansas, okay. I think that this is worth bringing up regardless, because they are trying to speak standard Japanese because they are in Tokyo. Exactly. There's a lot of people who they're from a particular region of Japan that uses non-standard Japanese. And again, I'm going to get blowback from this, but I think that's okay, because I think I'm just saying the truth. This is what I've experienced. They will, if they're around other people from that particular region, they'll speak that dialect because they feel comfortable speaking that dialect with those people. But if they go to a place like Tokyo, they will change their accent because they don't want other people to know that they're speaking that way. And I think that this is kind of different from, like, I used to go down to Texas every summer when I was growing up and visit my cousins down there. And of course, they spoke with South American, not South America, but, Texas, with kind of like a Texas dialect. And I never changed my Seattle English to kind of match their English, to match their particular dialect. But there's many, many, many Japanese people who kind of do that in Japan, because if anything, I feel like there's kind of more emphasis put on what you sound like as a Japanese native speaker. And like, I've met people who've gotten bullied because they spoke Japanese with a particular accent, and they were therefore considered like a inakamono, kind of like a hillbilly, so to speak. And again, there are many people that will kind of hide the dialect that they were brought up with because they're like embarrassed by it or something like that. So again, this might not be the point that the immersion guy is trying to bring up right here, but to say that Japanese people aren't conscious of their of pitch accent when they speak Japanese, I think that this is false in many circumstances. Not false across the board. But again, I've encountered, here's a good anecdote. This is an anecdote, so treat it with a grain of salt. I dated a girl that was from a part of Kansai when I was in university, okay? And when I was dating her, she spoke, but when I wasn't around, she spoke with a certain kind of Kansai bang. A certain kind of Kansai dialect. But whenever she was with me, she always spoke standard Japanese. And she had her reasons for that. I don't know, whatever those were. But what happened one time, I had never heard her speak in Kansai Ben. I had only ever heard her speak in standard Japanese. And I remember one time we were hanging out, she got a call from one of her Kansai friends, and she switched into Kansai Ben immediately. And she was speaking in pretty hardcore Kansai Ben like the whole time. And after she hung up the phone, I wasn't trying to say anything, what would you say? I wasn't trying to say like an emotionally loaded statement. I was just kind of making an observation. And I basically said to her, wow, you sound like a lot different when you speak Kansai Ben versus when you don't. And she started crying because there's kind of reputation in Japan that Kansai Ben is a little bit more aggressive than other dialects. And she didn't like the fact that she sounded aggressive to me, her boyfriend. Was she caring too much about that? Yeah, I would argue that. Like, I don't care. Like, you shouldn't care about this so much. But she did. And again, like, I've met a lot of people who have hid their Japanese because they don't want to get bullied, or have tried to change their Japanese when they go to Tokyo or something like that. And of course, that's the reason why, resources like this exist, because there's a certain kind of spoken Japanese. When you speak that way, the people on the listening end will have certain unconscious perceptions of that kind of Japanese versus other kinds of Japanese, right? Like, I think this is all pretty obvious, but it's something that isn't really ever, I haven't really seen it brought up terribly often, but it's related to both this, native speakers make these kind of mistakes and no other native speakers ever care. And also as well, related to this native speakers don't really give an F section of the video. I think that it's really circumstantial. There are some native speakers who definitely do care and will go out of their way to hide their accent because of it. And there are other speakers who are like, yeah, I'm from Kansai, I don't care, I'm always going to use Kansai Ben or whatever. But the fact that natives are making that distinction is, I think, fairly good evidence that there's going to be other people, that there's going to be people who notice those kind of mistakes when foreigners are making them as well. And again, we have to kind of remember that the kind of pitch accent mistake that a Japanese native makes is very different from the kind of pitch accent mistake that a Japanese beginner or intermediate learner will make. Maybe not so much at the higher end. Like, if you've been studying Japanese a long time, then maybe you are making pitch accent mistakes that are a lot more similar to the kind of pitch accent mistakes that a Japanese native would make. But I don't think that's true for early on. But let's keep going. Okay.
Really don't give a fuck. But let's say for some reason or other
Okay, Yudai Sensei, when I was growing up, I had to fix my accent too because a lot of people would judge you for having non-standard accents. Exactly. Thank you. This is, if anything, this has been true for the majority of Japanese people that I've met that are from a region that uses non-standard Japanese. They do care about the way that their Japanese sounds. And again, that's not to say that they therefore also care about what your Japanese sounds like as a foreigner. The argument that I'm trying to make is that people care about how they sound, and they will often try and modify their speech based off of that because they're trying to project a certain kind of tone. And this is true for native Japanese people when they're only speaking Japanese. And if you're trying to project a certain kind of tone when you're speaking Japanese, if you have studied pitch accent, you might be able to make a more informed decision about the way that your Japanese sounds. Maybe. Again, this isn't true for everyone.
Really want to sound native and attain the most natural sounding accent. Will pitch accent really make you sound native? The majority of the most native sounding second language Japanese speakers didn't even worry about pitch accent.
Most of the native sounding learners didn't worry about pitch accent. Okay,
so on YouTube, there's a Japanese woman learning English through immersion, and she has a playlist released about 2 years ago in which she and her husband go through and nitpick advanced learners Japanese as requested by viewers. This might seem petty, but it was intended for advanced learners who aspire to attain perfect Japanese, as well as to answer the question of whether a second language learner can sound 100% native. There were a few Japanese learners who, according to these videos, sounded completely native. Many of them either had little experience studying it, or had never studied pitch accent at all, and would even frequently make so-called pitch accent mistakes. On the other hand, there were some who had more accurate pitch by Tokyo standards and yet sounded less native. Their conclusion was that pitch accent really isn't a big deal, and that even if your goal is to sound native, there are other factors that are much more important for sounding native. Things like your actual pronunciation and the flow of your speech, which are things which I personally believed can be harmed by pitch accent obsession. Just take...
Yeah, I think this is very true. Again, fixing pitch accent and pitch accent alone isn't going to result in you suddenly sounding native overnight if other aspects of your Japanese aren't that good. And yes, it's also true that studying pitch accent will certainly, again, kind of, at least while you're studying it, you'll go through that growth pain where you'll probably slow down and you'll take a hit to your fluency during that particular period. But let's keep going.
Look at this clip in which they conclude that a Czech man fluent in Japanese sounds completely native despite constantly making what would be considered mistakes if you were to judge by the standards of the Japanese spoken in Tokyo.
まあ、標準語に限定するなら、ね、標準語ではないんだけど、でもネイティブに聞こえるから。そうだね。ピッチャーってそんなね、気にしないんだよ。発音が良ければ。そうだね。
If you speak
Okay, so no one cares that much about pitch if your pronunciation is good. And again, I think that there's a lot of truth to this, but I think we also kind of, it's worth asking, are you going to be in the same situation as this Czech dude in this video? Are you going to end up at the same point that he is at right now, based on the way that you've studied Japanese up until this point, based on where you are right now, and based on how you plan on studying in the near future or the indefinite future? There's a lot of things that are very circumstantial, and to say that, okay, well, this guy only, every other element of his Japanese is very good. Therefore, even if he's making these pitch accent mistakes here and there, he still sounds native. Therefore, it's kind of ridiculous to think that anyone else would ever benefit from studying pitch accent. I think that we're kind of making blanket statements at this point. Yes, again, there are many people who speak Japanese way better than me, and that have never studied pitch accent. And at the same time, there are thousands of people who have studied pitch accent, and in doing so, have significantly improved their Japanese. So, listen to me, listen to him, listen to arguments across the board, and come to a conclusion that you think is most logical based on all the information that's out there. Yeah, even this guy notices that his pitch accent sounds off. And again, like, it's kind of like, I think it might be worth posing the question, okay, so this Czech dude, every other aspect of his Japanese is perfect, right? Maybe his pitch accent, maybe by studying pitch accent, he would then sound 100% native. Maybe he wouldn't. Maybe he would take a hit to his Japanese, and it would do more harm than it would do good. It's very difficult to tell. But again, I think it's worth posing the question.
If you speak naturally with a native-like pronunciation, even if you mess up the pitch accent, it'll often just sound like a native with a bit of a regional accent. There's even a video...
Again, kind of, let's listen to that point one more time.
If you speak naturally with a native-like pronunciation, even if you mess up the pitch accent, it'll often just sound like a native with a bit of a regional accent.
Okay, so if the argument is essentially, if everything else is more or less native level, then no one's going to really care if your pitch accent is off. And again, I think that this is mostly true. I think that if your rhythm is perfect, if your pronunciation is perfect, if you're very eloquent, and you only occasionally screw up pitch, then yes, in many circumstances, you will only sound like a Japanese person who kind of gets like maybe tripped up every now and then. But at the same time, there are many people who like in the same way that many Japanese people regularly mistake R and L, but other than that, they don't have that many really obvious things with their spoken English that you could like easily put your finger on. There's a fair number of Japanese learners out there, again, my former self included, that I would say like eigo rather than eigo, or I would say nihongo rather than nihongo, or I would say imoto rather than imoto. And it's, I'm kind of repeating myself at this point, but I think it's again, it's very difficult to make a blanket statement and say that, well, look at this guy, he didn't study this, therefore you're all fine. I think it's a little bit, I would like to, at the very least, just kind of produce tools that people can choose to either use or not use. And rather than saying that this is the answer, you definitely need to do this.
There's even a video where they find a video of someone who's from Okinawa speaking standard Japanese and nitpicking her Japanese to prove that even many Japanese natives make what the pitch purists would call mistakes. It's easy for pitch peddlers to point out all the mistakes that advanced learners make, but it's just as easy to forget that you could do the same with many natives. There's also one important distinction to consider that's often overlooked: the technical difference between intonation and pitch. In conversation, these two terms are usually used interchangeably, and I don't believe there's any practical reason for learners to distinguish between them. But to put it simply, pitch accent is when you go up and down, and intonation is how far you go up and down. For example, on a piano, I might go up one note or two notes. In both cases, its pitch is rising, but how far it rises makes it sound completely different. That's intonation. I would argue that intonation is far, far more important for sounding native than pitch accent. And I'm convinced that a major reason why many of those who make pitch mistakes and yet still sound native is because of natural intonation, as all natives are invariably going to have native-like intonation even if the pitch accent varies by region. And intonation is something that can only be acquired naturally and subconsciously through lots of input. Most pro-pitch arguments are
immediately goes to imoto. The anime influence is real. Well, the reason that I bring up a word like imoto is because it's one of these words that, it's an odaka word, and odaka words, generally speaking, are the most difficult for people who come from a stress accent language to wrap their head around and start saying with the correct pitch accent, because we're so programmed as stress accent speakers to put stress somewhere in the word. And it's never at the end of the word. It's if you hear imoto ga, if you've never studied pitch accent, there's a high probability that you will literally hear that as imoto ga, even though that's not what people are saying. And because it's a word that comes up fairly often in the same way that, that's true for ototo, it's a good word for pointing out that particular phenomena.
Based on obsessive perfectionism. This is probably the main reason for the pitch paranoia over the last few years. Obsessive perfectionism. Just look at one of the most prominent pitch professionals on the internet, Matt vs. Japan. Stalking his Twitter page in preparation for this video, it's pretty clear that he has an intense intellectual fascination with pitch accent as a system of analytical study. In other words, he's a pitch nerd. There's nothing wrong with this, and I would never dream of discouraging anyone interested in something to avoid studying and learn about it if they derive pleasure from doing so.
Stan,
but the problem
I really
arises when you
appreciate that
conflate your
point.
interest.
Stan says, I agree with the immersion guy and have defended that very point, intonation, myself a lot in the past, but having options is never a bad thing though. Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the point that I'm trying to make. Whether or not you want to study pitch accent, that's up to you guys. It's going to be beneficial for some of you. Probably not that beneficial for other people that are out there. But for the people that would like to study it, it's good to have the option to study it if possible. And one more thing with regards to the intonation point that the immersion guy brought up earlier, because I think that this is Metatron. Hey man, nice seeing you live. Hey, what's up, dude? Good seeing you again. I've been watching a lot of your content recently. I can't really get into the details, but it's like a lot of the spicy stuff about like the culture wars and stuff like that. It's like the new Assassin's Creed. I thought that was really, really interesting. I liked your take on that the most. This is kind of a completely different topic, but you guys may or may not know that there's like, I don't know, there's kind of like this big argument on the internet right now. Maybe it's not that big, maybe it's kind of a small argument, but there's a lot of people that are upset or happy that Yasuke is the protagonist of the new game, the new Assassin's Creed game that is based in Japan. And Metatron, my buddy Metatron, he made, I think, probably the best video on this particular topic, which is, okay, let's follow the evidence rather than saying that well, this is obviously why these people did this, or this is obviously why Yasuke was a samurai or was not a samurai, and like everyone on that end is stupid and everyone on that end is stupid. It's like Metatron did a really great way of kind of breaking down the facts that were out there, being very objective and not pointing any fingers. And I really appreciated that. I appreciate that very much. Yes, people lost their minds. Yasuke the samurai that owns no land. Yeah, I mean, like I can't comment on this. This is something that I'm not qualified to comment on in any detail. But I did find it very interesting to see people, what would you say, the tension kind of bubbling up on the internet about this particular topic. And of the videos that I did see on this topic, I thought Metatron had the best one. And there he is right here in the thumbnail, the pitch accent, what's the title? The pitch accent controversy in Japanese. Yeah, watch Metatron's video too. I would encourage you to watch his video too after this, so you can make an informed decision. I got to run. Thank you, Dogen. 5-toed sloth bear. Hey, thank you for stopping in. Okay, let's keep going.
In something with necessity. It's one thing to study and dissect the intricacies of a language in your pastime for fun, and another to argue that without it, you ruin your ability and annoy people with how awful you sound. This is often reflected in many of the pro-pitch propositions, which drastically overestimate the importance of pitch accent and the negative consequences of having so-called poor pitch.
Okay, I think that this is true. I'm not going to comment on any of the drama surrounding pitch accent or any of that, because that's kind of a different topic. I'm trying to kind of talk about whether or not it's practical to study this. And let's listen to what he said one more time so that I get the immersion guy's wording correct.
This is often reflected in many of the pro-pitch propositions, which drastically overestimate the importance of pitch accent and the negative consequences of having so-called poor pitch.
Yes, this is true. I think that it's disingenuous to say, if your pitch accent is off, it's the end of the world, and Japanese people won't take you seriously, and you'll never be able to have meaningful relationships with Japanese people, and therefore you do need to study pitch accent. I think that that's, again, kind of like fear-mongering, which I don't think is helpful at all. And I also think that the first thing that he said, which is that a lot of people maybe overestimate the benefit of studying pitch. I think that's true as well. Like, improving your pitch accent by even 50% or 75% or hypothetical situation, getting rid of every single pitch accent mistake in your spoken Japanese, if the other elements of your Japanese aren't that good, it's the net gain that you're going to make from that isn't going to be it's not going to be a very big deal. At the same time, you could get rid of a lot of the more obvious pitch accent mistakes that you're making and raise your pitch accent batting average significantly by learning some of the core rules when it comes to, with regards to pitch accent. So fear-mongering is not good, and it probably seems like I'm kind of speaking out of both sides of my mouth right now because I'm kind of contradicting myself a little bit, but you can sound very natural even if you don't study pitch accent. 100% true. At the same time, studying pitch accent may be a way to significantly improve that aspect of your Japanese, which that might make a big difference if pitch accent is the one big thing that you struggle with. But at the same time, if you struggle with a lot of things and you just focus on pitch accent, it's not going to be the master key that solves all your problems. So yes, 100% true. I 100% agree with the notion that studying pitch accent and obsessing over pitch accent is not helpful, and that fear-mongering is also not helpful. Pitch accent can definitely help, but we need to think about the scope of how much it can help and kind of your experience, where you are with your Japanese, etc. Be realistic with your expectations. All about personal goals. I agree with Dogen's response too. There is no contradiction in having two unrelated statements being true at the same time. Yeah, I guess that's true. I appreciate that. I'm not going to repeat myself. Let's just keep going.
Just look at this comment. Anyone watching this video will probably recognize how incredibly ridiculous it is to equate the occasional intonation mistake of a word with having a thick Chinese accent. And yet this is the type...
Okay, this is something I want to be a little bit more careful of.
Anyone watching this video will probably recognize how incredibly ridiculous it is to equate the occasional intonation mistake of a word with having a thick Chinese accent. And yet this...
Okay. Again, he's saying it's not the same to occasionally make a pitch accent mistake as it is to have a big, thick accent. And that can be true, but it can also not be true, because constantly making pitch accent mistakes could contribute to a thick accent. In the same way that, again, if you're regularly mixing up your R's and L's, if you're a Japanese native and you're trying to learn English, that could contribute to a thick Japanese accent. Pitch accent is one of the things that could potentially contribute to a thick American accent. It's definitely not the only thing, right? It's by no means the only thing. And we shouldn't make exaggerations, but at the same time, I think it's fair to say that pitch accent can definitely contribute to sounding foreign. Like if you say, 俺はそうですね、日本語を5年間勉強しています。That sounds like a thick foreign accent. Now, maybe I was going a little bit overboard with the pitch accent, maybe, but there's, again, like a fair number of Japanese learners who, if they say 俺, they don't say 俺, they say 俺. Or if they say 日本語, they don't say 日本語, they say 日本語. So what exactly contributes to a thick accent? I think it's a little bit disingenuous to try and separate the two and say a thick accent is one thing and an occasional pitch accent mistake. Well, it's not disingenuous. I shouldn't say that. But pitch accent mistakes can certainly contribute to a thick accent. Okay?
This is the type of rhetoric that can often be seen by pitch propagandists. Going through the most prominent pro-pitch points, it becomes clear that enough...
Here's a really good example. There's a meme, kind of at this point on my channel, which is 上手ですね. However, for a very long time, I was mispronouncing the word 上手. I was mispronouncing the word even after I studied pitch accent, because the first time I studied pitch accent, I studied kind of just the basics of it, as opposed to kind of studying a little bit more into like the intermediate and advanced details. So like I would say the word 上手, like good at Japanese or good at something, I would say it as 上手. Like 日本語上手ですね. すごく上手ですね. And this is incorrect. 上手 is also an odaka word, which means if an accent, if a particle or like the des or whatever comes after it, then the accent is going to come on not any part of the word. It'll come at the very end of the word. So 上手ですね. Not 上手ですね, but 上手ですね. It can be very difficult to make this distinction. There's no laws against the pitches, Batman. I agree with Dogen here. I think pitch accent mistakes are a symptom of a prevalent accent. Thank you. Yeah, Stan, I think that you've been bringing up a lot of really good points here. And I appreciate the kind of counterpoints, the bits where I've kind of got like a blind spot, and I appreciate, again, when you're thinking, when you've kind of said, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
The significant part of the emphasis on pitch accent seems to arise from a desire to make oneself look good and impress natives, even to avoid
Let's listen to that one more time.
dominant pro-pitch point.
Or Metatron, plus what may appear as a small difference in pitch to a non-native would be a big difference to a native Japanese. As an expert, you also notice these as well, of course. Yeah, I don't know if I'm necessarily an expert. I've created a course where I think a lot of people will hopefully benefit from this, but yes, there are certainly many things that if you do know the depth of the mistake, so to speak, you can not appreciate it a lot more, but certainly assess whether or not, well, if you can notice the mistake, you can therefore kind of necessarily make a better judgment about whether that's a big mistake or a minor mistake. And of course, natives have the ability to unconsciously do that because they've got all the rules built into their minds.
It becomes clear that another significant part of the emphasis on pitch accent.
Where can I find the course? So my course is, here you go. Patreon.com/Dogen. I'm going to talk about it more kind of at the end of this video because again, don't sign up for my course just because you saw this video, okay? Because the immersion guys brought up a lot of good points. You might not benefit from studying pitch accent. You got to think about where you are. You got to think about critically about the things that I'm saying because I am trying to sell a pitch accent course. Watch Metatron's video. Maybe watch some of Yudai Sensei's videos about pitch accent. Maybe watch some other. I've got like probably 10 videos that are completely free on YouTube that are all about pitch accent, like the basics of Japanese pitch accent. One really good to know Japanese rule when it comes to 2 mora, 4 mora compounds. Again, there's like 10 videos that are out there for free, and you should maybe watch those before you sign up with the for the course because, well, you can determine based on watching those videos whether you think what I'm saying is helpful or not. So I'll kind of save my course for the very end.
Seems to arise from a desire to make oneself look good and impress native.
Thank you, Metatron. I appreciate that. So let's...
Emphasis on pitch accent seems to arise from a desire to make oneself look good and impress natives, even to...
Yes. The desire to... The focus on pitch accent often comes from the desire to... 紹介ありがとうございます。いや、とんでもないです。The desire to sound native. Yes. Why are we like this? Why are weebs like this? Why are we all like, it's actually kind of like a unique thing when it comes to weebs. And what I mean by this is that this isn't just about Japanese language. This is kind of related to a lot of things in Japan in general. Like if you log on to like the anime YouTuber scene, it's super polarizing and divided and toxic, whatever that means. And the reason for this, in the same way that there's a lot of really heated opinions about pitch accent, I've got a strong opinion about pitch accent. Hopefully it's not toxic, but I think that so many people get kind of heated about this thing is because there are so many weebs, like myself, that Japan means so much to them. There are so many people who started studying Japanese because their personality didn't really match up with the culture that they were raised with. And they thought, based on what they saw in Japanese movies or anime or whatever, I'll fit in better in Japan. And that's true for some people. Some people might have a rude awakening again after they go to Japan, but they kind of see Japan as their way out, their way of kind of being reborn. And I was definitely one of these people. And if you're like this, then again, Japan becomes very important to you, and all things Japan related kind of become like part of your character. It's like, this is my favorite anime, and if you talk bad about it, like, we can't be friends anymore. Like, this is like the trashiest like take on this particular thing. Like, I'm unsubbing from like, this anime YouTuber because of like what they said about this, or like, look at this drama, XYZ. The reason that we all get so heated up about this is because Japan is our golden ticket to a better life. Hypothetically, it's like, we think that if we go to Japan, all of our problems will be solved. And becoming kind of hyper aware, and this again kind of manifests itself in so many things, whether it's your like for anime, like, I've got good taste in anime. That's me. That's my care. That's my virtue. I'm proud of having this taste in anime. That's my good quality. And therefore, I'm going to get like heated about people who disagree with me. Or again, like, there's a lot of people, I've hopefully matured a little bit since then. But when I was growing up, when I was like in middle school and high school and university, certainly as well, I had way, way, way too much pride in my Japanese. And I was like, I'm going to be the foreigner that speaks better Japanese than like all the other foreigners. And I was really, really passionate about that because Japan meant so much to me. And I was like, that's going to be my thing. That's how I'm going to be someone special in Japan on top of going to Japan. It's like, I'm going to go to Japan. And then on top of that, I'm going to be someone special in Japan. I'm going to be, that's what I'm going to be known for. A lot of us want to come to Japan and not be like those other foreigners. Do you know what I'm saying? Oh, it's so real. It's so real. Again, we all want to be special. Japan is kind of a way for many of us to feel special by putting our foot in the door. But at the same time, many of us can feel special by becoming very good at a particular thing. And that's not a negative thing. It's just, you shouldn't let becoming skilled at something be something that affects the way that you interact with other people, hopefully. The true weeb experience, the not like other girls memes. Yeah, everyone wants to be the main character. So like, yeah, there's a lot of people that have a lot of pride in their Japanese. And Matt versus Japan is one of them. Is he oversensitive about his Japanese? I'll let you guys decide that. I know Matt personally. I consider Matt a friend. I'm not going to speak bad about him. But, I don't know. Is he oversensitive about that? I don't know. Again, make up your own mind. Am I oversensitive about some things? Yeah, definitely. But don't let your insecurities or again, let's all kind of, maybe can we have a balanced discussion about these things, about taste in anime and, the role of pitch accent in Japanese without getting overly emotional? Okay, let's keep going.
Avoid being judged negatively by Japanese speakers who are prejudiced towards non-standard Japanese accents. But to me, worrying about this seems to suggest a sort of insecurity that will take a lot more than a bit of pitch accent study to fix. Why go into so much effort just to impress a small minority of people who would judge you for making subtle mistakes that most people probably wouldn't even know? A small minority of people study to fix. Why go into so much effort just to impress a small minority of people who would judge you for making subtle mistakes that most people probably wouldn't even notice? Okay,
this is a really good point. Why would you go into so much effort to study things that most people wouldn't even notice? I think that this is true at the later end of the diminishing returns graph. And what I mean by that, again, is pitch accent, like most things, it comes in the form of diminishing returns. If you've never studied pitch accent before and you start studying pitch accent and you study it for, I don't know, like 2 weeks or, I don't know, a month or whatever it might be, you're going to make the majority of your gains during those first couple months. We'll make this same metaphor with regards to bodybuilding. Most people have experienced this before. Like, if you go to the gym, if you've never been to the gym before and you start lifting weights, then in 2 or 3 months, the people around you will notice how your body has changed, because 2 or 3 months in the gym for someone who has never touched weights before makes a very big difference, right? However, if you've been lifting weights for like 7 or 8 years or 10 years or whatever it might be, then adding on like another, 10 pounds to your bench press or something like that, even if you're able to tell the difference, in your own physique, that's probably because you are obsessed with this particular thing, and you care very much about like your physique and like the numbers that you're putting up and that kind of thing. And so like the people around you, if you're already huge, if you're already ripped, they're not going to notice like one more like half centimeter on your pectoral muscles on your chest, right? But they will notice if you've never lifted weights before, and again, you spend like 3 months in the gym, people will be like, hey, have you started working out? Like, you look a little bit bigger. Pitch accent is the exact same thing. Most people who have never studied pitch accent before, again, if you learn maybe just the basics, many of which are for free on my YouTube channel that you can just Google, you will make a difference that I think you will be able to make a difference in your Japanese that I would argue, yeah, I got the point. Okay, I'll keep going. Yeah. I'm being redundant. Thank you.
If you love pitch accent and enjoy studying it,
yeah, it's like cutting your hair. Yeah, that's a good way of saying it.
Or for some reason have an intense desire to sound like a perfect Tokyo native, then by all means go ahead.
Do you even lift, Dogen? For what it's worth, I think this could be funny. I used to be in really good shape. You guys, you want to see something funny? I used to do this thing again called martial arts tricking. Let's check that out real quick. Dogen tricking. This is me from like 15 years ago when I was at university. Check this out.
金利気にしてますか？今のままでいいって思ってません？ au 自分銀行なら金利が高い。
Oh, this is so 懐かしい。Oops, sorry guys. Okay, so this is me during 2006. So this is my first year out of high school. Yeah, the Dogen lore, 17 years ago. So this is me with my shirt off. Here we go.
Let's go. Yeah. For those of you that want to know what we're all about, it's like this, y'all. This is 10% luck, 20% skill, 15% concentrated power of will, 5% pleasure, 50% pain, 100% reason to remember the name. He doesn't need his name up in lights, he just wants to be heard, whether it's the beat of the mic. He feels so unlike everybody else, alone, in spite of the fact that some people still think that they know him, but fuck him, he knows the code. It's not about the salary.
Yeah, again, this is baby Dogen right here.
It's all about reality and making some noise, making a story, making sure his click stays up. That means when he puts it down, toxic picking it up. Let's go. Anyway, he never really talks much, never.
Oh yeah, I might get like a copyright strike, so maybe I should mute it. I don't know, but if this video is up, then I guess that means I just can't delete, or I can't monetize this stream probably. Anyway, that's what I used to be like in university. And I bring this up because someone said, Dogen, do you even lift? For a very long time, this was my entire life, and I could do like, I don't know, 25 pull-ups, and I was pretty strong, but I tore my rotator cuff, and I went from being able to do like 25 pull-ups to literally 0 pull-ups. But now I've got a pull-up bar in my house, and over the course of 2 years, I've gone from being able to do literally 0 pull-ups because of this injury that's been, kind of haunting me for the past 10 years to I can now do 10 pull-ups consistently. So I'm really proud of that. Completely unrelated. Maybe we can get back to the video now. Okay.
The occasional intonation mistake, desire to make oneself look good and impress natives, even to avoid being judged negatively by Japanese speakers who are prejudiced towards non-standard Japanese accents. But to me, worrying about this seems to suggest a sort of insecurity that will take a lot more than a bit of pitch accent study to fix.
Yeah, that's fair. Again, like, pitch accent is something that you can improve and get better at, but having good pitch accent isn't going to make you a great, cool person if you've got a bad personality.
Why go into so
But I want to say that I'm not trying to say that about Matt. Again, I consider Matt a friend. So
much effort just to
please make your own judgments based on what you've seen.
impress a small minority of people who would judge you for making subtle mistakes that most people probably wouldn't even notice. If you love pitch accent and enjoy studying it, or for some reason have an intense desire to sound like a perfect Tokyo native, then by all means go ahead. But the majority of immersion learners have absolutely no need, and probably won't see much, if any, merit in studying it. And as I mentioned earlier, studying it may even hinder your speaking ability.
Yeah, again, we talked about that. It's true. If you study pitch accent and you've never studied it before, you will take a hit to your fluency. You should treat it like a basketball, like dribbling exercise. Do it seriously when you're in practice mode, but then when you actually have a conversation, go into it and think, this is the game. I don't have time to, think about pitch accent or dribbling or whatever. I'm going to actively not think about this now. And you can just let your muscle memory, your pitch accent muscle memory take over. And if you've studied pitch accent, then in my experience, you will see gains and you won't have to do that consciously. You can do it unconsciously.
Language learning is simple and doesn't need to be complicated. The great thing about immersion learning is how simple it is. Theoretically, all you need to learn a language to fluency is to just sit down and consume a lot of comprehensible input. Originally, immersion learning was about culling.
You're way too kind about someone who uploads such a video clearly targeting part of your work. I don't think that's true. I think that this guy, the immersion guy, I think he went out of his way to not mention me. Because at the beginning of the video, he specifically says, I'm talking about Matt specifically. And so I'm not trying to, start any beef with the immersion guy. I think he's brought up a lot of really good points that a lot of people can benefit from hearing both sides too. And if he makes the follow-up video, again, I would encourage all of you guys to check it out.
Fat. Getting rid of all the unnecessary complications like grammar and memorization, and stripping language learning to its essential core. Throwing away all the bits that don't matter and only keeping the bits that do. And yet people keep seeming to find ways to overthink and needlessly complicate such a simple and elegant process. There are many potential causes for this. Marketing is a big one. There are people who financially benefit from the pitch mania, and people tend to get
Yes, me. Again, I benefit from the pitch mania. That's me. So financially. So keep that in mind.
Swept up in it simply because they can't trust the process. It's hard to believe something so complicated as a language can be learnt so easily and effortlessly. Perhaps the vacuum left by removing traditional study makes people uneasy, and they feel they need to fill it with some secret formula, some panacea to fix everything and make everything perfect. But trust me, just keep listening and reading and you'll get there. That's it. It's so simple. There's no need to overcomplicate it. Just sit back, relax, and keep getting input. It's that simple. Thanks for watching.
Okay, so last point he brought up is basically, again, something that he seems to have, I think that he brought up earlier, which is that you can develop pretty dang good pitch accent even if you don't study pitch accent actively. And provided that you're going through a specific kind of immersion-based approach. And I think that there's a lot of truth in that for a lot of Japanese learners out there. At the same time, there's a lot of people who are already studying Japanese, again, in maybe like the classroom setting or something like that. and it's not an entirely immersion-based approach, and it might be a little bit too late to change that, maybe you've already developed some bad pitch accent habits that you're trying to correct. Certainly, in my opinion, studying pitch accent, if you fall into that category, would be beneficial in terms of getting rid of some of those bad pitch accent habits. And I also do kind of fundamentally disagree with the notion that, well, I wouldn't say I fundamentally disagree. It's that, yes, most of the more egregious pitch accent mistakes do seem to iron themselves out over time, provided there is enough time. But again, it's like there's a lot of people who don't want to have to wait years to get rid of some of those more egregious mistakes, and studying pitch accent might be a way of addressing that. So, yeah. I really disagree with that last sentiment. You open yourself up to a lot of gaps without dedicated attention to certain areas. Yeah, again, it kind of comes back to what I mentioned earlier about how it's very difficult to give kind of like a one-size-fits-all approach, because some people, when they study Japanese, they start by studying Japanese alone in their bedrooms with cassette tapes like me, then go to university and study it for like 1 year at an American university, then go to a Japanese university, and then back to an American university. Some people only do immersion-based study, and I'm more of a fan of the immersion-based method than I think probably anything else. But at the same time, I'm more of a fan of a supplemented immersion method. And what I mean by that is, I think that just doing immersion and just listening to native Japanese all the time, I think that that's really good, but that you can accelerate those gains even more by supplementing that with additional studies, whether that's with like, a grammar dictionary and flashcards, or again, maybe pitch accent studies and like phonetics, general phonetic studies. But the guy brought up the immersion guy brought up a lot of really good points in his video. And I wanted to kind of make this video because, again, I've tried to avoid the drama, and I tried to kind of avoid the drama in making this video as well. Hey, Foxhound, what's up, dude? My Foxhound used to edit some of my videos way back in the day. He's now a VTuber that has content that is not necessarily safe for work, I should say, but it's good to see you here. So is pitch accent a scam or not? Well, pitch accent is not a scam or not. Pitch accent is just an aspect of the spoken Japanese language. And if you try and teach it in a certain way, teach it and market teaching it in a certain way to kind of, what would you say, almost trick people into learning pitch accent, that might come across as a scam. For sure. But pitch accent in and of itself, of course, that's like saying, is accent in English a scam? It's like, of course it's not. Of course it's not. It's just part of the English language, and some people would benefit from studying that specific thing. Dude, hope that you're doing well. Yeah, I am doing well. Hopefully you're doing well as well. I got distracted by a Persona 6 thing and then randomly heard Dogen say not safe for work. What? I don't understand how most of the immersion guy can defend Anki in the same way, but deny that you can study other areas such as pitch accent in a similar way to supplement immersion. You should learn all parts of language at the same time. Do not isolate any part of it. Well, I actually kind of disagree with that. Like there's a lot of people that do like the RTK, or remember the kanji method, and they do that in conjunction with other elements of their Japanese studies. I never did that. I only studied kanji through studying vocab, so I would kind of pick up kanji through osmosis, and that worked pretty well for me. But again, you got to think about, what are my goals? What am I trying to do with Japanese? What do I want to learn? What do I want to do with my Japanese when I get really good at it? Because it's no longer good enough to just say, I speak Japanese like a native, or I don't know, like 80% like a native or 90% like a native. It's like you really want to learn Japanese in a certain way such that it complements another skill that you might have so that you can leverage it, right? Yeah, it's all about your personal goals. Dogen, keep up the good work, man. Love your content. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. There's no reason to learn Southern American English if you're never going to go there. Yeah, Dogen, do you still actively study Japanese now? Did your motivation decrease after reaching a certain level of good enough? Yeah, absolutely. Like I did stop actively studying Japanese because, one second. Because right now I'm focused a lot more on like on creative writing. So like, rather than reading books like this right now, like, accent dictionaries and like the phonetics of Japanese, the phonology of Japanese, et cetera, I'm reading books like this: The Anatomy of Story by John Truby, Poetics by Aristotle, Save the Cat Goes to the Movies, and then also Screenwriting for Dummies. Again, I'm trying to hedge my bets. I'm not trying to say like, okay, yeah, if you study pitch accent, like you've made it, you're good to go for life. It's like, nope, diversify. Definitely diversify. Again, pitch accent is one element of Japanese, and it's by no means the most important element of Japanese. Definitely not. However, because it's the thing that's usually not covered in a lot of Japanese language courses, I think that there's merit in teaching it for people that want to learn more about it. Because for a very, very long time, it was nearly impossible to learn more about pitch accent and even determine whether or not you were making pitch accent mistakes because there weren't a lot of good pitch accent tools that are out there. However, after starting to teach pitch accent on my channel, other people have started to talk about pitch accent as well. There are many videos out on YouTube right now that are talking about pitch accent, whether or not you should study it, whether you shouldn't study it. If you do want to study it, here's how you should study it. Here's some basics of pitch accent. To me, I see all of this as a net gain. It's like at the very least, people have more options available to them. And I think that that's a really, really good thing because, again, when I was making my phonetics course, I tried to create the course that I wanted to have when I was studying Japanese in high school and university. Because if you don't understand Japanese, then it's very difficult to get through a resource like this that explains pitch accent in Japanese. First of all, you don't even know like what information is practical and what information isn't practical. So I just tried to make the resource that I wanted. But again, you got to think about this. Pitch accent, even among just spoken Japanese, it's just one thing. There's rhythm, there's pitch accent, there's pronunciation, there's devoicing, there's aspiration. There's so many elements of spoken Japanese. And if you want to sound as natural as possible, I personally think there are a lot of people that would benefit tremendously from learning pitch accent. Is that true for everyone? No. Are there people that will negatively affect their Japanese by studying pitch accent because they will become overly conscious of it? Yes. Is it usually, are most people able to avoid falling into that trap? Yeah. Because again, you can kind of treat it as like an exercise, like a basketball, like dribbling exercise or something like that. So TLDR, if you have an accent, you won't sound native. If you want to sound native, if this matters to you, you have to lose the accent. Maybe you can get rid of, maybe some can get away with just osmosis. Maybe others need pitch accent. That's the perfect summary. That's the perfect summary. Dogen, what do you think about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth? Onigiri. Is that you? Onigiri. Off I go. Great watching your stream. You are always my number one. Thank you so much, Metatron. love your content. I would encourage everyone here again to check out Metatron's content. He makes great videos, very grounded, very thoughtful videos about a lot of really interesting topics. So check out his channel. Really great dude. Hope to see you again soon. What do you think about, by the way, guys, I got to go in about 15, 20 minutes maybe, but I'll spend the remaining maybe 20 minutes of this stream answering questions and hanging out here. I didn't play Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, actually, because I was scared of the game hurting me because the original game meant so much to me. I didn't want it to betray my expectations, and based on the reviews that I read, it's funny you mentioned that because Aristotle probably has the greatest quote about this ever written. I'm going to read this aloud. Of all plots and actions, the episodic are the worst. I call a plot episodic in which the episodes or acts succeeded one another without probable or necessary sequence. Bad poets compose such pieces by their own fault, good poets to please the players, fan service. 4. As they write showpieces for competition, they stretch the plot beyond its capacity and are often forced to break the natural continuity. That sums up basically everything that I've heard about the storytelling in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It says everything about the game, the music, the combat, the world, the animation, the cutscenes, it's unreal. It's unbelievable how good it is. But at the same time, in trying to kind of rework this universe and make it into this multiverse kind of thing, they stretched the plot beyond its natural capacity and broke its continuity. And many of the critiques that are out there when it comes to Final Fantasy VII, the Rebirth anyway, they say it kind of felt like it didn't stick its landing with regards to the story. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, I can't play this game because the original meant way too much to me. So, and before I forget, I want to really quickly go back to this and say, again, the immersion guy, he made a great video that I would encourage everyone to watch. I apologize to you, the immersion guy, if it sounded like I was making like personal attacks. I tried my best not to. I'm not trying to send any, hate your way or anything like that. You brought up some great points. I was just trying to present what I thought would be the other end of those arguments, so to speak, so that people could ideally make a more informed decision. He may not make a follow-up video. If he does, I would encourage all you guys to go and check that out because he'll probably point out some things that I overlooked in making this video. So again, think critically. That's the main takeaway of this video. Are you an advocate for early output? Again, it kind of comes down to like what your goals are. It's like if you want to sound as natural as possible, like that's the most important thing to you, and you care more about sounding 100% natural than sounding 95% natural, but also enjoying the language learning process, you probably should avoid too much output early on. But a lot of people, it's like they're not willing to wait years before they start speaking Japanese because they want to use this tool that they're developing and they're learning. So it all kind of depends on your own personal goals. Oh yeah, I want to sound natural. In that case, it's probably good to pump the brakes a little bit with regards to the output. I don't know exactly where you are in your Japanese studies, but most of the evidence that I've seen out there seems to indicate that a lot of input will help tremendously with sounding natural. That includes pitch accent, but also other things like rhythm, pronunciation in general, aspiration, again, devoicing elements of Japanese that I talk about extensively in my series. They all seem to benefit at least a little bit, if not significantly, from a lot of input early on. Now, I'm personally of the belief that, again, you can supplement your immersion studies with things like a grammar dictionary or, like my pitch accent course or whatever it might be, but take that with a grain of salt. Not everyone thinks that way. I can tell you tried to be objective despite you having skin in the game. Really cool. Well, thank you. I mean, that was the goal. That's always been my goal. I've wanted to create a tool that people could use if they thought it would benefit them. Well, there's going to be a lot of people that don't think that, and that's Totally fair. ピッチアクセント大事です。皆さん、日本語の勉強頑張ってください。頑張ってくださいね。ありがとうございます。Yeah, so this person seems to think that pitch accent is very important. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think it's good to train your ears first by listening to a lot of... Erusha! So guys, the GOAT, Erusha, the voice actress that was in my recent ChatGPT video, she's in the chat right now. Erusha, I think it's probably okay if I mention this, but Erusha isn't even a Japanese native speaker. She's got phenomenal Japanese. She's got way better Japanese than I do, but she didn't grow up speaking Japanese. She doesn't have any Japanese blood or anything like that, but she's got phenomenal Japanese. So again, to each their own. I don't know if she studied pitch accent or not. She certainly seems to have done a lot of input, but yeah, she's ChatGPT. And again, it's very situational. Some people are going to benefit tremendously from learning pitch accent, and I honestly believe that. And there are other people that have enough willpower and fortitude and motivation to go potentially years without doing that much output. And if you fall into that category, then maybe studying pitch accent maybe isn't the best idea. I don't know. What do you think, Erusha? I'm interested to hear what you have to say about this. The thing that I definitely will say is that in my personal experience, and I think that this is true for the overwhelming majority of learners, it's much more difficult to correct a bad habit than it is to develop a good one. And so if you are at the very beginning of your Japanese studies, I would certainly recommend at least checking out the free stuff that I have on YouTube when it comes to Japanese pitch accent, because first of all, I only use high quality native recordings from a trained speaker. So it's quality stuff and you don't have to spend any money that way. I think my Japanese improved the most after a long period of listening to Japanese radio/podcasts and training my ears first. Yeah, fair enough. I think that there's a lot of people that seem to fall into that category. I unfortunately fell into a different category where I studied Japanese and I'd been doing output for a little bit of amount of time. And I kind of started studying pitch accent as a way of rectifying the mistakes that I had, kind of the bad habits that I had already developed. Some people don't have those bad habits because, again, of the way that they've studied up until that point, or because they're at the very beginning of their studies. So again, you got to kind of assess where you are with your own personal studies and think about whether or not studying pitch accent would be good based on where you are. Well, pitch accent, but also, again, devoicing, aspiration, etc., etc. How long have you studied? You sounded amazing. Yeah, everyone, you should go sub to Erusha. She's so good. She was so great in that video. It was so great working with her. Thanks, chat. I'll be working at Japan soon, so I'd love to hear your guys' experience. Yeah, hell yeah, nice. The top linguists can't seem to agree on whether or not shadowing is effective for learning languages or not. Yeah, I think that's true for kind of like what we're talking about right now. There's a lot of debate about what exactly the best method is for studying language. And based on what I've seen, it seems to be, again, like if your goal for the long run is to sound as native as possible, then probably leaning into an immersion-based approach is best. But there's a lot of factors that you got to consider about, like, again, like what is my first language? How old am I? Have I already started studying Japanese? Do I potentially have some bad habits already, et cetera, et cetera? We're all kind of like starting at different points. I'm on Genki lesson 1-4. Am I too much of a beginner to study pitch accent from your course or the NHK pitch accent book? Thanks. Well, the thing about the NHK pitch accent book is that it's all in Japanese, so it probably wouldn't be very helpful. With regards to my pitch accent course, what I would say is I do think that you would benefit from at least checking out the free content that I have on YouTube, like the introduction to Japanese pitch accent. I've got, 2 or 3 videos that kind of cover that topic. if you watch those videos and you think what I talk about is helpful, then you can make a decision after that about whether or not you want to sign up for the rest of my course on Patreon. And again, when you're able to recognize what the correct sound is, you can self-correct when your pitch accent is off. So a lot of input is definitely important. I agree 100%. 100%. Being able to self-correct is probably, again, like, it's like such a critical ability, which is why, again, I one of the reasons why I tried to create my course, because if you've been studying Japanese for a fair amount of time and you haven't come across pitch accent at all, there's a fairly high probability that depending on how you've studied up until that point, you might not be able to pick up on pitch accent if you studied Japanese in maybe a more like kind of traditional way. But if you studied through only immersion, maybe you can, especially if you have really good ears. Studying with Mieje. Thank you very much for the first super. I can't tell what currency this is, but thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Do you need a bachelor's degree to get a job in Japan? It depends on your situation. But yeah, being able to self-correct is really important. And you can get to that point. Some people can get to that point with just immersion. Some people can get to that point with immersion and pitch accent studies. Some people can get to that point with more pitch accent studies, but I think immersion is critical for everyone. My favorite video of yours is definitely Sharks and Vanity. Do you think you'll do storytelling like that again at some point? I'm working on it right now. Yeah. Storytelling is the thing that I'm leaning into most right now. I've got 2 big projects that I'm working on right now that I can't talk about at all, but I've been working on both of them for more than a year. You can't self-correct if you can't hear pitch changes. Exactly. I got to get going in about 5 minutes. There's maybe a couple little things, additional things I want to cover real quick before I go. This is going to be kind of self-promotion. So please keep that in mind. Again, think about everything I'm about to say with a critical mind. Is Dogen trying to, does he believe what he says, or is he trying to sell me a product? Think about that as I walk through these points. 1, I've got a course on Patreon. I'll link it right here. Oops, sorry. Patreon.com/Dogen. I've got like an 80 lesson course. Most of the later lessons, they're beyond the practical, but most of the earlier lessons I think are very, very practical. And I break down pitch accent, and I break down Japanese pronunciation and things like devoicing, and again, aspiration, where your tongue should be, how to say arguably more difficult words like gein or fuinki or whatever it might be. Most of the things that you might have struggled with in the past, maybe like how to say bendy. I try and break all of these down in detail, but in a practical and easy to understand way in my course that I've just linked here with high quality native recordings from someone who went through the NHK Academy. So they know what they're doing. They've got a good mic. And I think that it's a good course. It's $15 a month. You can use it as long as you want. You can use it for 1 month and quit and go through most of the lessons, or you can, use it for an extended amount of time, or you can sign up for a discount you can sign up for a year and get like, I think a 16% discount. But one additional thing that I do want to mention right here is that recently we've began working with another trained native speaker. Her name, maybe I won't mention her name right now, but in addition to the Japanese pitch accent course, which is a series of high quality videos, in my opinion, there are also Anki decks that you can use to improve your Japanese. But then on top of that, we are now offering a free live Zoom session taught by a Japanese native speaker, this woman who's been trained in this topic specifically, and how to teach this topic to non-native speakers. You can now get access to a live session with her via Zoom at that same price point. So this is something that we did recently. I said, I want to offer a little bit more value to the people that sign up for my course. Maybe a lot of people would really benefit from live one-on-one feedback. So, and there's also private lessons that you can get from that same native speaker, but those are not free. But every month now, in addition to access to all the pitch accent flashcards and all of the pitch accent videos, we also now have, is that live stream available for Patreon members? Yes, exactly. So if you sign up for that $15 tier, that gives you access to all the lessons and again the flashcards, et cetera, then you will also be getting access to a live Zoom session with a native Japanese speaker who knows how to teach pitch accent at a very advanced level and is very familiar with my course. You can hear her speak live. You can get feedback from her live at the end of that session. And she'll spend that session breaking things down and giving live feedback. Because one of the tricky things about pitch accent is that it can be difficult to determine whether or not you're getting it right during the early phases if you're not getting feedback. And I'll have another announcement about this in the not too distant future, but that's kind of a topic for another day, so I'm not going to get into that right now. But I do think that a lot of people would benefit tremendously, again, from the amount of stuff that's, in addition to not only the lessons that I've kind of promoted in the past, but Natsumi Sensei, I will say her name, she's the one that's teaching our course, the live Zoom lessons, and you'll get access to these lessons for free at no additional charge. I just eat the cost of that so that I can give you guys, ideally, more value. And yeah, again, it's kind of like one additional thing that I think a lot of people would benefit from. How often are the live Zoom sessions? Once a month. Once a month. Again, no additional cost. There's an announcement about a week in advance before each one that says what the Zoom discussion will be about. It's mostly Natsumi Sensei talking about a particular phenomenon, but then also kind of, again, answering questions related to that at the end of the lesson, and also non-related pitch accent stuff at the end of the session if there's time as well. I was there at the last session. So Natsurin, you were there at the last session. What did you think? Does that live session? Yeah, and again, you can watch those sessions also after the fact. So yeah. What time is the lesson held in JST? I think it depends. I think it's not always the same time. Give me 1 second real quick. I can try and see when the last lesson was. Do you have access to the video on demand too? Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And the second one actually just went up, or it's about to go up. One of the two. So let's see real quick. Yeah, Japanese phonetics group lesson. Here, I'll show you guys this real quick, actually. So I'm just going to post this in chat real quick. Actually, I don't know if I can do that. Sorry. Okay, I can show this real quick. So I'll go back to YouTube, the reaction, and I'm just going to go up to here. And I'm going to scroll down. And you can see recent post. This is Natsumi Sensei right here in the middle. These are some of the people that took part in that lesson. And these are the topics that were covered in the lesson. This went up 3 hours ago, and it was the second lesson. And you can see like right here, we announced when the lesson will be beforehand. The last one was 9 a.m. Japan time. I think that most lessons will probably fall into that particular category, but yeah. And I think that a lot of people would potentially benefit from that. It's a new thing that, again, hopefully only adds value to the people that are signed up. I got to get going. Does anyone have any other quick questions that I can answer right before I go? I haven't attended the live lessons, but I've really enjoyed Dogen's course. I highly recommend it if you want to learn pitch accent. Miss Milielli, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Luckily that I can watch your live stream today. You really made my day, Dogen. Thanks for the awesome stream. Otsukare-sama desu. Arigatou gozaimasu. And I want to give one kind of final shout out to also Erusha. Go check out Erusha's channel. She's about to blow up. She's so good. She's such a good voice actress. Okay, I'm currently studying for N3 and noticed the volume of materials is increased significantly from N4. How much effort from your experience is required to get from N3 to N2? Probably as much, if not more, than that of which is required from N4 to N3. Like each gap gets like exponentially larger. Yudai Sensei as well. I'm still wondering which video you wanted to show. I think it was like 1 minute long. Also check out Yudai Sensei, great channel. Trying to think of any other videos. Thank you so much. Thank you for being you, Erisha-san. And again, last thing of all, the immersion guy. He made a great video. I was just trying to kind of objectively lay out my thoughts in an objective manner. I don't want anyone to send him any negativity at all. In fact, I think that a lot of people could maybe benefit from watching his other videos, whether those are related to pitch accent or not. So I want to thank him for creating that video and allowing me this opportunity to kind of talk about a lot of things that have been on my mind for a while, but I haven't really had a good, well, not really good timing to really thoughtfully articulate in long form at length. So yeah, as someone academically inclined, I find having Dogen's videos as something to actively study is a big motivator. It's Yudai, I believe. Could be. Yeah, I'm not sure about that, but Yudai Sensei desu ka ne? Yeah, I gotta get going, but thank you all very much for your continued support. Maybe sign up for my pitch accent and other Patreon information. There's the link right there in the chat. I'm not trying to guilt anyone or, again, do fear mongering. There's the link if you're interested. Maybe check out the videos that are free up on YouTube before you sign up. I'm going to leave things here. Thank you all very much for your support, and I'll see you again soon in the next comedic video. One final shout out to, again, Yudai Sensei and also Erisha-san. Erisha-san regularly does streams as well. Probably one coming up. I'd encourage you guys to all check that out. All right, I got to get going. Thank you guys so much. See you guys soon. さようなら。じゃあね。バイバイ。お疲れ様です。